Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order this afternoon, Thursday, October 12th, 2023, meeting of the Pierce County Council and Committee of the Whole. It is 1:31 p.m. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Councilmember Campbell.
Excused.
Thank you. Councilmember Krueger.
Here.
Councilmember Denson.
Here.
Councilmember Hitchens.
Here.
Councilmember Herrera.
Here.
Councilmember Morrell.
Here.
And Councilmember Mello.
Here.
You have 6 members present.
We have 6 members present and a quorum. Item number 3 is approval of our agenda. We are doing legal and judicial and public safety this afternoon in the Committee of the Whole, reviewing biennial budget recommendations. Is there any objection to approving the agenda as presented? Not seeing any. The agenda will stand approved. As indicated, we've invited the prosecuting attorney forward to present on her recommendations for the biennial budget. We'll then move to the Department of Assigned Counsel, commonly known as the Public Defender. And then we'll take a brief recess and let the Sheriff's Department know that we're ready for them. And after that brief recess, we'll assemble back for the Sheriff's Department continued discussion on their proposed budget. So that's what we have planned today. Mr. Boki, to help me further introduce.
Thank you, Chair Mello, Paul Boki, Council staff. So this afternoon, we do have the prosecuting attorney, the Department of Assigned Counsel, and then, as you mentioned, the Sheriff's Department. The prosecuting attorneys is behind the legal and judicial tab in your budget book. It's section 8, and it begins on page 20. I would note that there are a number of areas besides it being a general fund account. There is also an ARPA element, and there is also a new prosecuting attorney position in the Drug Enforcement Fund, which is a special revenue fund where the marijuana dollar revenues go. So just to note those items. With that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Madam Prosecutor, thank you for making time to be with us. We're eager to hear your thoughts and presentation. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. Mary Robnett, I am the prosecuting attorney for Pierce County, and I very much appreciate this opportunity to address this Committee of the Whole regarding the proposed next biennial budget. I do have a PowerPoint presentation prepared.
It'll advance as you say next slide.
Pardon me?
It'll advance as you say next slide.
Okay. In my presentation, I wanted to let you all know that we took into account what the priorities of this council are in forming your budget. Next slide, please. I think primarily where we fit is public safety, and it sounds like we're under the public safety tab of your budget book, but also behavioral health systems and substance use disorders. I know those are high priorities for this council, and I think that's where we fit in the big picture. Next slide is our organizational chart. I've put in here as a reminder to you about how our office is organized. Next slide, please. We're made up of 3 divisions. I know this council is aware of that. The criminal division, of course, being our biggest division and the bulk of the work that we do. We pursue justice for victims and for the community. Also, we try to use alternatives to incarceration where appropriate, therapeutic courts, and alternatives where appropriate. In our civil division, we represent the county and defend the county officials and departments in litigation. We, of course, provide legal counsel to all of the county departments, and we support behavioral health treatment in the civil division. I'll be happy to talk about that a little bit more. I'm really proud of the work that we're doing in the Involuntary Treatment Act in the civil division. Our 3rd division is family support, where we protect the best interests of children by establishing parentage and supporting child support, enforcing child support. Next slide, please. This is the breakdown, really, of our FTEs. We were asked early in the budget process to go through a budget cutting exercise to try to look at what budget cuts might do to our office and find ways where we could cut into the budget. We really don't have any place to cut into the budget except with employees. Our budget is primarily salary and benefits. We don't have any other big funds. We don't have any fleets of vehicles. We don't have travel, big training and travel extravagant budgets. So when we make budget cuts, we are cutting into FTEs. We currently have 170 employees in the criminal division. 8 of those are grant funded through various grants. 12 of them are ARPA funded. Were ARPA funded in the last biennial budget, and we anticipate 12 in the executive's proposed budget to be ARPA funded. I would also point out that some of those FTEs in the criminal division are also reimbursed by the state. 7 of those are reimbursed through the Blake Fund, and 2 of those are actually funded currently through the Behavioral Health Fund. In the civil division, we have 41 employees. 8 of those are in the Behavioral Health Fund. In the family support division, we have 21 full-time employees. They are 100% grant funded, 100% funded by the state. We have 12 administrative staff in the general fund. So our total funded FTEs are 240, 12 ARPA, for a total of 252. Next slide, please, is a recap of our focus, our main interests and priorities for the next biennium. The number one priority is to maintain our criminal division staffing levels. That is, without a doubt, the number one priority. I'll go into that a little bit more in more detail. Our number 2 priority is to increase our nuisance abatement services by adding 1 attorney. We also proposed to the executive that we add 1/2 FTE for a legal assistant to support that attorney. The attorney was funded in the executive's proposed budget. The half of FTE legal assistant was not. Our 3rd priority is to standardize the contracts process here in Pierce County, streamline the process, create a go-to person. This is something that our county departments have been asking for. We think it's needed. We proposed to add 1 county attorney to fill that position and create a go-to person for all things contracts, advice, review, negotiation, everything. It was not funded in the executive's proposed budget. We also asked for a half of an FTE legal assistant to support that attorney, also not funded in the executive's proposal. And finally, we would ask to add 2 part-time supported services positions and a half-time forensic interviewer. These were not included even in our proposal to the executive. I'll explain why. It was through a series of misunderstandings, or a couple of misunderstandings, but these are positions that are important to us, and so we would ask that you include those in our budget. So next slide, we'll go into my number 1 priority. Our most critical need is to maintain the current staffing levels in the criminal division. As I told you a few minutes ago, at the beginning of the budgeting process, we were asked to go through a budget cutting exercise. During the pandemic, during the last biennium, this council added 24 FTEs to our budget. 12 of those were funded with ARPA money to deal with the backlog of criminal cases that was created by, all of the closures and slowdowns. We had jail closure, some of the courts were closed. We had a difficult time getting cases into court. And it created a large backlog of felony cases, backlog of misdemeanor cases. This council added 24 FTEs. 12 were ARPA funded to deal with the backlog. The other 12 were to deal with various court decisions that came out in the last 2 or 3 years that created additional workload for us. Specifically, the Blake case, which decriminalized possession of drugs and created a huge workload for us. The Monschke decision regarding 18, 19, and 20-year-olds convicted of aggravated murder, the Domingo Cornelio decision, and the Houston Sconyers decision, all involved reevaluating and resentencing offenders who had been convicted who were either under 18 or between 18 and 21 when they committed various offenses. That created a significant workload, and this council added a dozen FTEs to our criminal division to deal with that. This is a priority for us to maintain these staffing levels going forward because we're still dealing with that workload. We are still dealing with the backlog of cases. I've got my PowerPoint, but I also handed you what I call the Cliff Notes. So the Cliff Notes, I'm a Cliff Notes person, and these are at a glance kind of some of the things that we're dealing with. But the workflow chart on my PowerPoint will show you what the felony workload has been and how it has increased from 2019, which was a rather normal year. The felonies increased. The number of felonies pending increased because we were unable to really resolve cases. We couldn't get cases into court. The high mark so the red line there is cases pending trial, and that's a really good barometer sort of how many cases are in the system. That's how many Superior Court cases are set for trial on any given day, and there's a snapshot for that. The Superior Court sends us a report once a week, every Friday, about the number of cases pending trial. Prior to 2019, that number was somewhere between 1,400 and 1,600 on any given day. That was a normal inventory of cases set for trial. And that number climbed dramatically when courts were slowed down during the pandemic. The high mark for that was in May of 2022, when we had almost 2,500 cases pending trial, almost 1,000 more than normal. The courts got opened up fully and fully operational, and that number came down to just about 2,100 by the end of 2022. It's currently down, we hope, below 2,000. It's been hovering around there, but it's on its way down. We're continuing to work through this backlog, but we need this staff to do that. We need the 12 positions that were originally funded with ARPA. The executive has included those positions in his proposed budget going forward, also funded with ARPA money. And it's important, I think, for you to understand the volume that we're dealing with, and then the other reality that we're dealing with are the cases that are pending are more serious and more violent. There's a more concentrated violent crime than we've ever seen before. We don't have a regular mix of cases like we used to. It's much more concentrated of much more serious cases, the ones that are more difficult to resolve, and those are the kind of hard ones that we're currently working through. We're headed in the right direction, but if we lose staff in the criminal division, it's going to head in the wrong direction. And the right side of that chart shows what our projection would be. This is what we showed to the executive, what our projection would be if we were to lose this staffing in the criminal division. On the next slide, please, we were asked to sort of describe the consequences of cuts if we were to cut. Not only would the cases pending go up, the workloads would go up. We would have been laying off employees. Probably in the neighborhood of 40, 42 full-time employees would have been laid off if the cuts as proposed had been imposed on us. And on this chart, there are a couple really notable things that I want to bring to your attention. We show the Pierce County population growth in the right-hand column in the year 2000 to 2023 and the percentage of change. But I want to draw your attention to the line where it says percentage of change between 2000 and 2018, before we hit the pandemic. The line that says percentage of change between 2000 and 2018, The Pierce County population grew by almost 24%, 23.9. Pierce County employees overall grew by 6.8%. Department of Assigned Counsel increased their FTEs by 11.7%. District Court increased their FTEs by 34.6%. Superior Court increased their FTEs by 19%. And the Prosecutor's Office increased their FTEs by 0% during that 18-year time frame. The next row shows the percent change between 2000 and 2023. That includes the years where this council added 24 FTEs to our criminal division to deal with these crushing backlogs and case decision litigation that we were dealing with. Even with the addition of those 24 FTEs, our increase was 15%, which is less than half of any of the nearest other stakeholders in the criminal justice system. I think it's important for this council to understand that our office has been running very lean through these years with the same caseloads that we're dealing with in District Court, Superior Court, and our partners at DAC. We've been running the leanest of all of those players in the criminal justice system. On the next slide, these were what we thought would be the direct public safety impacts to defunding our office by removing the additional staffing that was added during ARPA. It really would mean that we would probably have to lay off everybody in district court. Those are our lowest paid attorney ones. Our bargaining agreements require that we lay off, the last in is kind of the first out in most cases. And so cutting 24 FTE positions is going to mean layoffs of our lowest paid people, and it's more people than that. So it would drastically impact district court where we filed misdemeanors, gross misdemeanors. Those are important cases. They're not just misdemeanors. 70% of what we file in district court are either DUI cases or domestic violence cases. And those are the cases that I know, based on my entire adult career in this business, are cases that have a high potential for lethality. Those are important cases, and those are cases where it can be really crucial for there to be criminal justice intervention early. These kind of drastic cuts would really impact our ability to prosecute juvenile crime, and juvenile crime is, trust me, on the rise here in Pierce County, and I mean violent crime. It's on the rise, and it's a concern. The remaining cuts would impact our felony general crimes, probably property crimes, and the types of cases that we can actually still use therapeutic courts for. So I can't stress to you enough how significant this number one priority is for us to maintain our criminal staffing. And I'm gratified that the executive included that in his proposed budget to you, and I hope that you will include that when you pass the budget. Our next priority is on the next slide. This is our number two priority. This isn't a budget ask. This is just, I know it's a priority of this council, and it's a priority of our office as well, to find ways to get people treatment who need it. We have not had a lot of success getting people in district court interested in therapeutic courts. We have a very robust felony drug court. People facing a felony are often incentivized to get into a therapeutic court and do the hard work of treatment. We have not found that to be the case in district court. We're hopeful, and I was here a week or two ago talking to you about our diversion plans, and we do plan to do a pre-charging diversion for people charged with, or people facing unlawful possession of controlled substance charges. If they won't do a diversion pre-charging and they get charged, they may have DART, District Court Drug Court, as an alternative. But we haven't had a lot of success getting people interested in district court therapeutic courts. And I met recently with Chair Mello about this, over concerns that there aren't enough people in Veterans Court, for instance. And we are the gatekeeper for therapeutic courts, and that's the way it should be. That's the way the statutory scheme is set up, and that's appropriate, that the prosecutor is the gatekeeper. But, for instance, in the Veteran Court, at the time I met with Chair Mello a couple weeks ago, we had over 100 veterans that our office screened for Veterans Court. And about half of those, we said, this is an appropriate case for Veterans Treatment Court, Veterans Court. So out of close to 50 cases that we said, this is an appropriate resolution, we had 4 veterans who wanted to partake in Veterans Court. So we are the gatekeeper. We let cases in, but we can't force people to go in. And our fear is that for district court cases, it's often easier for a person charged with a crime to go do a day or 2 in jail than to go do a year or 2 in treatment. And it's just the reality of it. So we're excited about our number 2 priority, which is assisted outpatient treatment. And this is a relatively new statute. I spoke to the Public Safety Committee about this in the last several weeks, and I've spoken to some of you individually about this. This is a way this is not criminal cases. These are civil cases. These are civil petitions. They're handled in our civil unit by our Involuntary Treatment Act unit over there that's headed by Marcus Miller. This is a petition to the court that there's some person who is in need of treatment. It's not just behavioral health anymore. The legislature recently amended this definition to include substance use disorder. I met with the Speaker of the House last week and said, thank you for making that change. She's excited, too, that it sounds like Pierce County is really going to try to be out in front on this program. But a designated crisis responder can file a petition with the court, say this person is in need of treatment, and the person, with due process, can be court-ordered into outpatient treatment. This council has funded the treatment. It's available here in Pierce County. You have funded our Involuntary Treatment Act unit over in the Civil Division. It's robust, and they're working hard. Marcus Miller, who heads that unit, has been doing training with treatment providers, law enforcement, medical providers, schools, everybody else in town who is going to run into these people who are in need of treatment. So we have filed 2 petitions so far on substance use disorder alone. Most of them are behavioral health or I'm sorry?
Co-occurring.
Co-occurring, thank you. Co-occurring behavioral health and substance use. But we filed 2 on substance use alone. And we're very hopeful that this is going to be a tool that we can use here in Pierce County, funded with behavioral health tax money, to get people into treatment who need it. Not inpatient treatment, but outpatient treatment, where they have lots of supervision with a judge, lots of resources, and we're hopeful about it. It's our number 2 priority. It doesn't have a dollar figure attached to it. This isn't an ask. This is more of a thank you for funding our behavioral health unit the way you have, and we hope that they become too busy doing this and we're back here asking for more. Our next slide is our next priority, which is to increase the nuisance abatement services. This is not just a public safety impact, but maybe also an equity impact. This is need all over the county in every kind of neighborhood for nuisance property, cleanup of encampments, et cetera. This is funded through the Drug Enforcement Fund. We asked for 1 county attorney 2, the addition of 1 county attorney 2, and 1 half-time legal assistant to support that attorney. The executive included in his proposal the attorney, but not the legal assistant. We're hoping that you will consider funding the legal assistant as well. This is the next slide, I think, lays out why this is important, why it's our number 2 priority, and it can be paid for through the Drug Enforcement Fund, and we hope that you will consider funding not only this attorney, but the legal assistant to go with it. Our next priority is on the next slide. That is to add a county attorney as a contracts attorney. This would be somebody experienced in drafting contracts, negotiating contracts, reviewing contracts. Our code and charter call for our office to review every contract in the county. Right now, there's not a sort of a standardized way of doing contracts, and there's not a standardized person who does it. It's kind of a little bit on everybody's plate, and we think it would be very, very beneficial to the county in many ways, cost-effective to streamline this process and add a specialist to do this work. The county attorney and 1 half-time legal assistant to support that attorney come at a biennial cost of $520,000. That was not included in the executive's budget. We would ask that you consider funding that and including it in your budget. My next slide kind of outlines the need for this. This is a very dense PowerPoint. I know there are too many words on each slide for a true PowerPoint presentation, but my understanding is that you may take this with you to your budget retreat. So I wanted to make sure it had lots of information when you're deliberating about how you're going to use our tax dollars here in Pierce County. My next slide is our final priority, which is to add 2 part-time supported services position and fund an existing child forensic interviewer. We did not make this ask. We did not make this proposal to the executive in our proposal to the executive and finance. We didn't understand that we needed to include this in our budget. We met with County Human Resources earlier in the year to talk about these supported services positions. These are essentially jobs, part-time jobs for disabled people. We think we have at least 2 part-time positions that we could fill in our office. These would be jobs doing discrete tasks within our office. We have made great progress in our office diversifying our workforce and our staff. I'm going to get to our DEI priorities, but we have made a lot of progress diversifying our staff in many, many ways, including racially, age, ability, disability, neurodiversity, et cetera. And we think it would be very, very beneficial, not just to the county, but to the supported services clients to create a couple of part-time positions in our office. The cost is laid out here at the bottom of the slide. And the second part of this is to fund an existing part-time child forensic interviewer. This is an employee we've had half-time or part-time for the last 2 years. An experienced person who we brought on basically when schools reopened after the COVID shutdown, and we had a flood of reports of child abuse and neglect. Lots of those come from the schools. Schools are mandatory reporters, and so kids who had been at home for a year or a year and a half or 2 years were coming back to school, and we were getting lots and lots of reports. We had a high need for a child forensic interviewer. These are specialized interviewers who know how to interview kids without suggesting what the kids should say. And we have been funding this. We brought this part-time person on with the cooperation of finance, the permission of finance department, but we were funding it with vacancy savings and probably oversight on our part that we didn't realize this half-time position wouldn't be automatically built into the budget build. The automatic budget build goes off existing FTEs, and this was kind of an extra hire, not an FTE, so it was an oversight on our part that this ask wasn't included in our ask to the executive. So we would ask that you consider funding these 3 part-time positions. They're all important to us for a variety of reasons. My next slide.
Madam Prosecutor?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to pause and see what questions we have about your priorities before you move on to your decision packages. we want to really make sure we understand your
Thank you.
priorities so we can consider them properly. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Madam Prosecutor, and for all the work of putting this together, and I too love Cliff Notes, so
Yeah.
thank you. I wanted to ask about the child forensic interviewer. Is this somebody different than who we work with Mary Bridge at the Child Advocacy Center that has child forensic interview? This is someone just in your office?
Right. This is not our only forensic interviewer. Our interviewers do work at the CAC, at Mary Bridge. I'm not sure if Mary Bridge has their own interviewer at this point or not, but
Okay.
but our interviewers frequently, I mean, they are very busy up there. We have 2.5, I think. Is it Lana? Yeah, 2 full-time and this part-time one.
Okay, so this is kind of looking at having enough in that particular skill, because it is a particular skill to
Right.
be able to do that, for what we're seeing as far as caseload and sadly the need in our community.
Right.
Okay.
Right. For many, many years, our office has had forensic interviewers who work at the CAC, at the Child Advocacy Center, which is kind of a one-stop place for families who are having abuse and neglect situations.
And worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you. I was getting a little confused here, looking at the numbers, and so just trying to track this through, because it's a little bit more high level. You talk about the impacts of us defunding the department. We didn't ask for the 4% reduction. The
right.
executive did.
Right.
So, be clear that the council's not, but even in the request for the 4% cut, when I come over here and look at what's in the book, you're getting, if I'm reading this correctly, a 9.2% increase in funding.
I think that's overall right, yeah.
Okay, so before we consider anything that wasn't funded, what was funded was a 9% increase and no cuts. So
Correct.
because a lot of people in public are watching this, newspapers write about this. You've put the words up on the screen of defunding the office, which was a minus 4%. And instead, what you've been given is a plus 9.2%.
Right. I think a lot of that's built in, sort of the COLA
Okay.
expenses, et cetera.
But
Yeah.
just, I don't want everyone watching at home or on TV who
Fair
are
enough.
watching to walk away with thinking that we were coming out of here defunding our prosecutor, having seen this up here, because it's not up here what the actuality is, which is a 9.2% increase. Zero,
Yes. Yeah.
shouldn't say zero cuts. So not in the executive budgets and the other priorities you have here are on top of the 9.2%
Yeah.
increase?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Yes. No, thank you, Councilmember Campbell. We were very gratified that the executive left our criminal staffing levels intact because it really did feel like it would be a devastating blow. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
So
It
were
was-
we?
It was an
well,
exercise.
I can't speak for all of us, but
It wa- Yeah, it was. an
I was very
exercise.
happy they left it in there too. So I understand it was an exercise. It just kind of what we just broadcast out over, and if people didn't have access to this book at the same time, they would think that that's where you're starting from, is a 4% negative, than asking for these other items to get back to zero, when really we're
Yeah.
already. Okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Prosecutor, just briefly, don't need you to dwell on this too long, but I want to make sure we understand the staffing summary that's in the budget book. I think it's okay if you don't have it in front of you. It shows that you don't have, I'm looking at the paralegal line. My mom used to be I think you know this, my mother used to be a legal secretary her entire career, so I know a smidge about a law office. You have one paralegal for the entire prosecuting attorney's office?
Zero.
You have
yeah.
zero paralegals. How does a law firm like yours work without I know you have legal assistants and,
Well,
how does a law
our-
firm like you work without a paralegal?
Our high-level legal assistants, I mean, it's all in a name, right? A
Okay.
rose is a rose is a rose. But they are They are very talented and multi-talented and probably doing a lot of work that a paralegal in a law firm would be doing. Our legal assistant 3s and 4s, they're,
They're
yeah,
doing paralegal type work?
pardon me?
They're doing paralegal type work?
Perhaps. I mean,
I'm
we
gonna
could, we
misclassify them in a
could, we
public
could get
setting.
offline and compare definitions, but yeah, their job descriptions include doing high-level work and civil discovery and lots of things that somebody called a paralegal might be doing in a different setting.
And you don't have a paralegal in this biennium. This budget gives you a paralegal. And I know you're going to get to that in the,
I don't think we're, no, I don't think we have a paralegal, and I don't think we're asking for one.
I think that the bill was based.
can you come to the microphone if you have the answer,
Sorry.
please? And introduce yourself for the record.
Yeah, I'm Lana Wyman, Chief of Staff for the Prosecutor's Office. We had one paralegal left probably around the time, I'm looking at Julie, that the budget was starting to be built, so it was probably a carryover from there, but since then we have, that paralegal moved on, I believe, so I think we're down to none.
Okay, we'll clear that up offline. Thank you for starting that. I just want to come back to one of your other asks around someone who full-time does contracts to move
Right.
contracts forward.
Yeah,
We do a lot of contracting
yeah.
here at the county. Generally speaking, right now, in your civil division, is it, 3, 4, 5, 6 different attorneys touch contracts, and it's kind of spread amongst several folks? Is
Yes.
that how it works? And your current concept here is you would delegate one person?
Right.
They would really focus on this?
Right, who could work with the various departments and standardize the contracts, standardize this procedure, streamline the process. We think it would be beneficial just in terms of how long it takes to enter a contract, making sure the contract is sound, saving us from unnecessary litigation. We think it would be a wise use of money and a streamlined process that would make our county clients happy.
Decent, would it be an overstatement to say that we would be able to see review time by all who need to touch the contract in the county, that this would be a service that could quite possibly help reduce review time, or that would be an overstatement?
Oh, I think that's the goal. I don't think that's an overstatement at all. I think that's the goal.
Any other questions before the prosecutor gets into the decision packages? Vice Chair Campbell.
So kind of following up on your paralegal one as I get looking here, and if we could just get some melding together, the chart that you had down here in the lower one, it says that there's 211 full-time employees in the 2025 budget.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you're looking at.
The little grid you have in the lower
Okay.
right-hand corner. And so under the 225 without extra positions, this is 211 FTEs. Our book says 240 FTEs. It's a more than 10% delta.
I think that's because that's how many people we would lose if we had to lay off, if those 24 positions were cut, plus the 4%, which was our exercise. That amount of.
Okay, this chart is part of the, if what was done that the executive didn't do.
Yeah, right. And then the bottom highlighted is where we would be if we lost those employees and lost the 4%. We would be, in the negative compared to all of the other criminal justice stakeholders, yeah.
Okay, I got it. Sorry, I was, thought. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Madam Prosecutor, or Ms. DeMuth, why does the budget book say 240 FTEs, and in the slide it says 252 FTEs? Do you want Ms. DeMuth to support you in this?
I think I can tell
Okay.
you, like 240 are funded. If I could go back to my page 5 on the PowerPoint, fifth slide.
12 are in ARPA.
Yeah,
Or an art-
240 are funded.
Yeah.
12 are ARPA funded.
And it shouldn't just, it doesn't just show up in the staffing, in the staffing summary in the budget book, all in one place? I know they're funded out of our, I'll get my question answered offline. I don't understand why it doesn't just show up in the staffing summary in one place in the budget book, regardless of how they're funded. I get that they're ARPA funded.
Yeah, so this, it is 252 with those, with the ARPA employees included.
Okay, yeah. We have a staffing summary in the budget book, right? And one would think, regardless of fund, you would see all the FTEs in one place. Thank you. I think we're ready to proceed.
I think we were at,
Your slide 16, Madam Prosecutor.
yeah, slide 16, it's a recap of our decision packages that we submitted to the executive, plus our request for the part-time supported services positions and the forensic interviewer. My next slide is just kind of a summary of the proposed FTE changes in the next biennial budget. The nuisance abatement attorney, we've asked for the half-time legal assistant, this contract attorney, the half-time legal assistant, the supported services positions, and the interviewer. My next slide is about the ARPA employees. My understanding is there is ARPA funding for those employees in the next biennium. And then our next slide is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I am very proud of the work that our office has done in the last few years in this area. As I said, we've got a very diverse workforce. That's really our primary asset for who we are and what we do. And I'm proud that our agency is looking more and more like the community that we serve. We've had robust efforts at recruiting. We have a very active equity, diversity, and inclusion team. We have regular meetings and trainings. There is a requirement for a EDI annual mandatory training for everyone in the office. Those are things that I personally approve of, that I think are meaningful and helpful. We've had a lot of programs that have helped us meet DEI objectives, including flex time, flex jobs, telecommuting schedules. Infants in the workplace has been a popular one. And my next slide kind of describes how we apply these concepts to our office. And it really is every day in who we are and what we do. And we're like I said, our one rich resource is our employees. And we have really embraced these concepts in what we do every day. Very proud of it. I've finished my presentation off with our mission statement, and I'd be glad to take any other questions if there are any.
Thank you. What other questions do members have for the prosecutor? We'll begin with Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. Thinking about the increased workload, one of the things that I always wonder about is when we start playing with FTEs, what happens to the other divisions? Because we know if we increase your workload, it's only as effective as we have a courtroom for them to go to. We have assigned counsel to help with the opposite side. So just looking at that the work you're doing, was there any look at those other areas to make sure that we will have places for these court cases to happen, for the work to happen if we have these staff on board?
Well, if you look at my cliff notes, again, where Councilmember Campbell directed my attention a few minutes ago, this chart, we're all in the same pot of stew. You know, we're in it with the DAC attorneys, we're in it with the courts. Between 2000 and 2023, the Pierce County population grew 36%. The DAC FTEs grew 37.3%. The district court FTEs grew 42.4%. the Superior Court FTEs grew 30.5%, and our office, with the addition of 24 positions, ARPA, Blake, et cetera, grew 15%. So we're in the same soup pot, we're handling the same caseload, and we're doing it with far fewer FTEs than any of the other departments involved. We have done some analysis in our office. I mean, we're keeping the Superior Courts plenty busy. There, I think, are maybe 8 or 9 criminal cases going as we speak, most of them very serious murders or Class A felonies. Some of the civil courtrooms are full of criminal cases. Criminal cases take priority. The referrals and filings for district court are down. They're down drastically from what they were. I mean, from 2020, from the year 2000 through 2018, they were pretty steady, and they have dropped off significantly. And in the meantime, there have been addition of 2 district court judges and a commissioner. So those, we're not really keeping, I don't feel like we're keeping those courtrooms busy. We have staff in district court. We need staff down there to appear on the dockets and do the work. We don't expect those filings to come back up. Superior courts are busy. Our Superior Court felony attorneys are very busy. Our referrals are going up. As I said, they're becoming more violent in nature. We're getting a more concentration of very serious felonies, and those referrals are going up. We expect that to keep increasing. So, I mean, we're hustling, and we're doing a lot of hard work with fewer FTEs than many of our partners.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Madam Prosecutor, we've chatted about this in private a few times, but I think it's helpful for the public to hear a little bit. I've asked you as a layperson, not an attorney, about this very subject about what is being referred to district court and what's no longer being referred to district court in your mind. With the advent of new laws just over the last 18 months from the legislature about how to especially deal with controlled substances, no longer a felony, at most a gross misdemeanor, according to new state law. One would think there would be more opportunity for referral to district court because district court takes misdemeanors, not felonies. And the opportunity for more therapeutic courts because of the new laws related to substance use possession. So that's, again, a layperson evaluating the world. Can you comment a little bit on how you're seeing the caseload in light of new state statute in this regard?
Well, I didn't check today, but last time I was here at Public Safety, we had 1 referral since the law really took effect or could be enforced mid-August, the new Blake fix on criminalizing possession of controlled substance. We've had 1 referral in district court. We anticipate having some, but not a lot. In terms of therapeutic courts, our office is a huge advocate for therapeutic courts. We have a very robust, as I said, felony mental health court, felony drug court. We have therapeutic courts in district court, but we are finding that a gross misdemeanor may not be enough of an incentive to make someone who's struggling with a mental health problem or a substance addiction issue, it just may not be enough to incentivize them to get into treatment. Gross misdemeanors, people are usually facing a day or 2, maybe 10, in jail. And we're finding that people may rather just do their jail time than go do the hard work of going into treatment, staying clean and sober, reporting to a judge, doing a UA to make sure they're in compliance. It's hard work to do treatment. And we're hoping that a misdemeanor or a gross misdemeanor is enough incentive, but it may not be. And it may be Council Chair Mello, that the criminal justice system isn't the perfect place to try to intervene in people's lives. We know that it's an intervention point. There are lots of intervention points. For anybody here, probably everybody in this room has dealt with loved ones or friends or acquaintances who've dealt with addiction. And there are many, many intervention points. Employers are great intervention. Criminal justice can be an intervention. But we're hoping that a petition from a crisis manager saying this to the court, saying this person needs help, we're hoping that court-ordered outpatient treatment may be something that we can actually make work here in Pierce County. It's not the criminal division. It is the court system, but it's another avenue. And so we're hoping that that may work. I told you earlier that we are the gatekeeper for therapeutic courts, but we can't make people do it. They still have to decide with their own attorney whether they're going to sign up for therapeutic court. I want to add one other thing that I meant to add earlier in terms of where these people are funded. I've mentioned a couple times today our felony drug court, felony mental health court. We have 2 attorneys down there and a legal assistant. Those people could be funded out of the Behavioral Health Fund. I think those are people that could be taken out of the general fund, maybe unfunded with behavioral health dollars. It ties our hands in terms of what they can do, but they have been doing this full-time for a long time, and we anticipate them doing it full-time for a long time to come in the future. So that is another way that this council could save a little bit in the general fund. I think I put in a slide in my PowerPoint about, or it is in the handout. In my Cliff Notes, there's at the little green box down here, kind of
Thank you for doing the math for us.
how we could save some of that general fund money.
Mr. Boki and Mr. Bridges, do we understand the drug enforcement fund? I'm circling back to another issue. Do we understand the constraints of the drug enforcement fund and what we can fund out of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions for Madam Prosecutor? Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, when you have said that the increase in the violent crime has happened, would the task force that the Sheriff's Department is looking at doing perhaps reduce that a lot of the same people that are committing the crimes that are increasing in the courts? Are you finding that?
We have met with the sheriff and others. We know that there is a disproportionately large percentage of crime that is committed by a small fraction of offenders. And yes, the sheriff has looked at trying to identify who those people are and proactively going out to get them into custody and solve crimes that they may have committed and get them off the streets.
So that would be beneficial in reducing your workload as well?
Well,
In a
we
roundabout
hope,
way.
yeah, we hope so, yeah, in the long run.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Morrell.
Mr. Chair, just to follow up on your misdemeanor and your gross misdemeanors, on repeat offenders, is it treated just, I mean, if he shows up 3 times, a person shows up 3 times, it's treated the same? Or is there a way that if we have a repeat offender that's got 3, you've seen the individual 3 times on misdemeanors, do you have any further authority through the courts to move them into some kind of treatment, or do they just serve their 3 days total and off they go?
No, we can't force anybody into any of the therapeutic options. Those are just options for them. And it's not uncommon, unfortunately, to see repeat offenders in both district court and felony court, superior court. But we can't, there's not a way to force them into treatment.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Do appreciate it. The Cliff Notes here will be very useful as we move forward to other ones. We're not going back to the whole slide deck to try to find where it's at. The increase in the nuisance abatement services, what would we've added one attorney looking for another half a legal assistant, and just in layman's term, what would that person be doing?
It's support staff for the attorney. We have just found that generally, anytime we add an attorney, we like to have half of an LA. Our legal assistants are extremely hardworking, and they support our attorneys. So they do all manner of things that any legal secretary or paralegal would be doing for an attorney.
Well, okay, let me just back up then.
Okay.
What would the attorney and that, I mean, increasing in nuisance abatement services, what is your role in that?
Well, we work with the public planning and public works, code enforcement. We bring petitions to, declare properties a nuisance. There's litigation involved.
Okay.
We have to prove a property as a nuisance. If there's a court order that it be cleaned up, then we have to enforce the court order. We work primarily with planning and public works.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Councilmember Cruver?
Thank you, Chair. Where is the animal control categorized in here?
They're in our civil division,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah.
Madam Prosecutor, one more question, and then we'll invite any final comments and wrap up, I believe. In our budget book, I'm not trying to ask you questions that you don't have ready access to, but we do, in the budget book, I think you're familiar, there are also performance measures in the budget book. I know you're busy, so maybe you haven't looked at this.
I haven't, but I may know the answer, I might not. I'll be honest about it.
In the budget book, there's performance measures for every division of county government, including yours. And in your division, it says number of diversions. There's a performance measure about number of diversions. And it says that there were 3 diversions in 2021, 2 diversions in 2022, 2 in 2023. That's an estimate still because we're not done with the end of the year. And the target is 2 in 2024 and 2 in 2025. What's the context here? What does that mean?
I'm not sure. I'm not even sure what you're looking at. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Weinman.
Thank you. That's a look back at, that used to be the True Blood work of diverting people out of the criminal justice system because of their mental health issues and into, treatment or resources in the community. It's not very robust anymore because the inputs into that system were impacted by COVID as well. So those folks are not being picked up. They're not ending up in the criminal justice system as much anymore. That may climb back up, but for the past biennium or more, that has really dropped off in terms of ability to use our resources in the criminal justice area to work to divert them out of the criminal justice system.
Thank you for explaining that. This is not meant to indicate the number of individuals we divert for therapeutic courts.
No, this is strictly the ones that shouldn't be in the criminal justice system to begin with,
Okay.
and get them into treatment because they have serious mental health disorders that are causing their activity.
We really do use the performance measures. It would be helpful if that were a little more clear, whoever's responsible for
We can do that.
Because we really do look at this and track this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hitchin.
You read my mind, but I was just going to go and ask because I was super curious. I guess for me, I would love, and just flagging this, the assisted outpatient treatment as we look at that as a new tool would be, I think, really valuable to track intentionally. And I also think specifics for our therapeutic courts, depending on what happens with all the funding here. I think it's really important to our council and the public who are looking at these and going, how are they working? So any of your...
I have that data. And
I am not surprised. So, but it's not here in a pretty little picture.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's just-
We'd like better access to more useful performance measures. Granted, a performance measure that's useful to us might be different to someone else, but
I can get you years' worth of data for therapeutic courts in Superior Court, District Court, and AOT, which is new, but we've had 24 AOT positions since July. That's a lot compared to what we're putting into
But
therapeutic
we
courts.
would like to see that.
Yeah,
That's helpful.
yeah.
One more performance measure here. Realize you're not seeing it. It's a number of pending felony trial cases per felony attorney, FTE. And it says the target for 2024 to 2025. Who knows if you set this target? But here in the budget book, it says the target is 25. 25 felony trial cases per felony attorney, FTE. And it says that the status is off track. What's the best practice?
So I set the 25 target, and the reason is that that is the measure we were at in 2019 pre-COVID. So that was how many felony cases pending trial compared to the number of felony attorneys we had in the criminal division at the time, where we felt like it's high workloads, but they were on track to complete them. We're off track now because of the backlog and the new violent crime cases coming in. So the one chart that's in your presentation and on the Cliff Notes that shows the these horizontal lines that go up and down, one of those is the pending trial. The one in the middle, the red one, is the pending trial cases, and you can see those numbers going up, and then we divide it by the number of attorneys we have in our felonies in the criminal division, and we're targeting to get back to where we were in 2019,
Which is?
25 per
Oh, so
felony
25, so
attorney.
25 is the target? And
Yes.
if we hit 25, we would be on track?
We would be on track.
Thank you for helping us understand that. So 25 is the real target. It's not.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Was trying to find the answer myself in here, but I couldn't, and this may not be as much for you as it is for finance. You mentioned that your read was that a couple of these positions could be paid for out of the mental health chemical dependency tax, which, very clear, it does allow for therapeutic courts, so I can see that. My question perhaps over there, where do I find our expenditures of the mental health chemical dependency tax in the budget book? Under
Human Services.
Julie Demuth with the Finance Department. It's under Human Services. There are pages for the Behavioral Health and Therapeutic Courts Fund.
Section 10, page 4.
10-4?
Yep.
10-5?
10.45, yeah, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Prosecutor, any closing remarks?
Thank you. I would just thank this committee of the whole again, and for giving me the opportunity to address you today. Thank you for funding our behavioral health unit over in the civil side. It's been a huge piece of work that they're doing, and it's good work and it's valuable work, and I know it is one of your priorities. It's one of ours, too. I know it's not lost on you that the recent public engagement survey, public safety was far and away the number one priority of people in Pierce County in every single demographic. And we're mindful that we're on the forefront of that concern, and we're trying to do good work. And we hope you will fund the resources that we feel that we need to continue doing the good work that we're doing. Thank you.
Well, thank you. On behalf of the council, really want to thank you for all the effort it took to prepare your budget proposal and prepare for today's conversation. The work you and your team do every day is beyond important, and we're really grateful for having such smart, hardworking, dedicated public servants who work on the community's behalf. We're very grateful.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Let's move, if there's no objection, I'm going to move us right into the Department of Assigned Counsel presentation. We will take a break after this one and come back for the Sheriff Department. So, Mr. Kawamura, the Director of Department of Assigned Counsel, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Mello, council members. I appreciate the opportunity to present the executive's budget for assigned counsel for biennium 24-25. So my plan was to just go through the template that was provided and obviously try and provide any additional information any of you may have. Okay, so I think we can move to the next slide. We identified the council budget priorities and essentially, and we did that throughout the template. The ones we think are significant in our budget proposal includes behavioral health systems and substance use disorder, public safety, social justice and equity, and youth and young adults. Next slide, please. So we've provided our organizational chart, and this reflects 2023. And I believe Mr. Bridges had asked for some elaboration on our staffing numbers, and I provided that, and I presume that was provided to the council as well. So essentially, the proposed budget would amount to a net decrease of 2 FTE positions for the Indigent Defense Delivery System in Pierce County. Division function areas, slide 4. It's broken out, I think, fairly similar to what the prosecutors' function areas are. We have a small administrative area. We have our primary area, which is criminal division, and that's basically adult and juvenile crime representation. We have a civil division that includes areas of practice that's not in the prosecutor's office. And I can go through them. And the primary ones are dependency, loss of parental rights, juveniles charged with status offenses, folks facing involuntary civil commitment at Western State Hospital, and contempt of court. And we also have contracted areas for representing people charged with sexually violent predator commitments, and most recently, representation of those who have been in the criminal process and determined not guilty by reason of insanity. And our last division is the misdemeanor division, which is primarily the district court of Pierce County. Next, slide 5 are functional areas, which basically highlights the division of staffing for each of these areas of practice. Slide 6, critical needs and challenges. Our primary focus for this budget cycle is creation of a conflict office, and I think we've provided information as to why that is. Finding qualified attorneys who are willing to participate in indigent defense is becoming increasingly difficult, and that's not a city or a county issue, that's a national issue. There are defender offices across the country who have had vacant positions for a long period of time, and there are people sitting in jails right now without lawyers. So this is a proactive measure that the executive is proposing to make sure that that issue doesn't present itself in Pierce County. My personal thought is, if this isn't brought forward and created, we will have that issue in this county, and there are counties in the state of Washington that are experiencing that now. So it's our number one issue. The executive endorses it. I'm hopeful the county, the council also understands the importance of this. I also wanted to make sure that the representation here is this stabilizes the delivery system. It's not necessarily a cost reduction issue. It provides the necessary number of folks that are qualified to represent people. It doesn't eliminate the panel. We have a number of lawyers in this county who have participated in representation for us for several years. They've done an exemplary job, and we have no intention of eliminating them from ongoing representation. The problem now is just the number of folks willing to participate is declining to the point where those folks, I believe, in the very near future will not be sufficient to accommodate our need. So I just want to be clear about this. It's not a substitute. It doesn't mean we won't have a panel. We still will have a panel, but we'll need both. And this will stabilize our need and the number of qualified attorneys to move forward. Racial, ethnicity, social, economic disparities. It's ongoing, and we've kind of highlighted that in our presentation and materials. I mean, in essence, we represent the folks that are encompassed in these priorities. By definition, everyone we represent is indigent. And in addition to that, a lot of folks have mental health issues, they have substance use issues. Obviously, certain racial and ethnic categories are considerably overrepresented in the justice system, and we represent all of them. I think it's fair to say we probably represent 90% of the folks charged with crimes. So it's an ongoing issue for us, and everything we do is focused on these groups. Clients with behavioral mental health issues, again, they're overrepresented in the client base that we represent. It's anecdotal information, but when you look at the complications for True Blood, et cetera, none of that's going away, obviously. And I would estimate that maybe a third to 40% of the folks that any lawyer in our office represents has some type of behavioral mental health issue. And that's why many of these folks are in the justice system to begin with. Juvenile offenders, Ms. Robinette talked about that, and I think there's headlines about the increase in violent crime. I'm certainly not a sociologist, but I don't think COVID helped any of that. And so I think we're going to be dealing with those issues this year, next year, and for years to come. We're struggling with those issues as well. There's an increase and an abundance of research about why juveniles should be treated differently than adults. Certain parts of the system, I think, identify with that. Others, it's more of a challenge. So we continue to train staff to be knowledgeable and aggressive advocates. Next slide, 8. Our budget decision package, and again, this basically is the implementation of the conflict office. It'll stabilize our delivery system, and again, I wanted to emphasize, and I'm sure all of you already know this, the representation is mandated by the Constitution. It's not discretionary. It's not, you may get a lawyer, you may not get a lawyer. You're entitled to one, and there will be litigation brought to this county if counsel isn't provided. So it's not if you want to, it's required. And this, I think, will fill an important gap, which I think will present itself very quickly. And the decision package, I think, kind of talks about some of the questions that might arise about why do this conflict office. The first one is urgency. And again, I don't see this as an issue that may present itself in 5 years. I think it's an issue that we're dealing with now. There are cases that come over my desk that I'm holding off for a few days because I don't really have someone that I feel that's capable of doing this type of case. So it's not something that I believe anyway that should be put off. I think it's something that needs to be implemented. The executive agreed with that, and I'm hoping you do as well. And what does the request address? Again, it addresses the provision of counsel to cases essentially that we cannot provide representation to because we have a conflict of interest that's recognized by the state bar and also by the courts. And essentially, an easy illustration of a conflict would be Joe is charged with assaulting Sam. We can't represent Joe because we're actively representing Sam. There's no way that we could forward the interests of both the accused and the alleged victim. Therefore, we would have to provide that case to an attorney who has no prior contact with either of these individuals. That would be a very common conflict, and that would have to go to a lawyer outside of our office. That's what this office would do.
Mr. Kawamura?
Yes.
This is an important part of your package. These people would work for you, or would they be outside counsel and independent contractors that your office would contract with?
They would be county employees. They would work in a separate office which is distinct from ours, and they would report to the head of this office would report to the executive. Now, the model can work when there's some collaborative ability. So, for example, an individual is arraigned, and the court appoints the Department of Assigned Counsel to provide representation. Those files would go to our office, and when we identified a conflict that we could not provide representation, we would in turn send that case to the conflict office. The head of that office would then, at that point, make all decisions about how that case was going to be handled. Who would do the representation, what resources were necessary, et cetera. And our office would play no part in any of that decision-making. Now, the way this, given that they're county employees, I think there are advantages that Pierce County could take advantage of for collaborative efforts, for support staff, for budgeting, maybe some other issue, IT, those type of things where there could be a collaboration. There could be no collaboration or discussion regarding individual cases. They would have to stay separate and distinct.
We're highly likely not the only public defender law firm that has to deal with this. What's another similar county public defender office that deals with conflicts in the way that the executive is proposing?
Spokane has a conflict office. Spokane County has a conflict office. King County actually has 5. The other...
and they work in the similar model as is being proposed here?
Yes. So you'd have a central office who would distribute cases, and then depending on what the situations were, it would go to the various offices. Because of the number of offices King County has, they obviously can take care of most of the issues themselves. They don't need external attorneys. With 2 offices, you're still going to have potential cases that neither office could handle. And then just for volume purposes, you may need the assistance of additional panel as well. And that's why I'm saying this is not going to be a substitution of one or the other. You'll need both, but what it does is it provides resources in the amount necessary to meet what's coming.
And this option does not exist at all in Pierce County yet?
No. No.
Any questions before we move off of the implementation of the conflict office proposal? Thank you for explaining that to us.
Okay. I just wanted to make one more comment that I neglected to say earlier. There are other options, and I wanted to make sure the executive vetted those as well. And A simple option would be, so what are you paying people now? What, if you were to just increase the compensation, wouldn't that solve this? And my response to the executive was no, and the reason for that is, when you look at the national trends and people looking for attorneys, it's really not a question of money. It's a question of there just aren't attorneys there to do it. So, for example, we're paying panel attorneys now about $90 an hour to do Class A felony work. The federal conflicts providers, their hourly rate is $164, and that can be for a felony or that can be for a Class B felony, you know, some type of property or drug offense, and it can be for a lower level felony. They don't have appropriate numbers on their panel now. And it's especially acute in the South Puget Sound area. There just aren't a lot of lawyers who are engaging in this work. So it's not as easy as just upping the compensation and expecting 20 people to come say, I'll do this. That is really not what any jurisdiction is experiencing. The other, I think, important variable of this is the provision of defense is becoming very sophisticated, and the standard of review is getting higher every year. That means you need people, to be blunt, who know what they're doing. And organized offices, my thought is in the last 10 years, and I think this is verified by data and outcomes, organized offices have stability because they have experienced lawyers that mentor young lawyers. They have the resources to provide services necessary to adequately represent folks. They have adequate budgets for training. And so that's really where you're going to find someone who actually has the ability to do these cases. And the other variable that's extremely important is you have to have the ability to handle a set volume. I mean, in the real world, there's volume. There's a lot of cases, and you're doing a lot of work. If you can't do that, then bringing a number of people into this situation, and they're going to just flounder when you're giving them cases, that's not going to be a productive outcome either. So I think there's a lot of reasons why this is an alternative, and this is the best alternative. We could move to slide 9. So our proposed FTE changes, essentially the 6 boxes would be the proposed staffing of the conflict office. It would be 4 attorneys, 1 legal assistant, and 1 investigator. What we would propose to eliminate would be a social service specialist position in our dependency area. We chose that as a budget reduction with the understanding that we have access to social workers from the State Office of Public Defense for dependency-related work. So we could provide that service to clients in the event we eliminated this position, and frankly, we've had difficulty filling the position to begin with. So that's our decision package there. And the balance of the reductions are the temporary positions appropriated by the executive in this council to deal with Blake matters and other court decisions. Slide 10. This was essentially a summary of the ARPA activities that we've been involved with, and I think it's related to a different slide about what's still pending, why aren't these completed. So we outlined the total backlog cases that we've provided representation to in the felony area and the misdemeanor area, the number of cases our attorneys personally provided representation, the number of cases that were sent to the panel, and then the overall total number of cases. We provided numbers as to how many cases were closed and how many are yet to be resolved. And I believe the total pending of this is or by our calculation, 429 cases. And it's evenly distributed, I believe, misdemeanor and felony. Slide 11. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I provided information for your review as to how we are meeting these very important issues. Again, when we look at our budgeting process, there isn't anyone that we represent who isn't involved in these issues. So it's everything we do is with a focus on why are certain people overrepresented in the justice system, why are people with mental health and substance abuse issues still involved in the justice system and not elsewhere. Specific areas to advance equity, I've kind of tried to illustrate what we're doing internally in our office to make sure that we're providing a supportive environment, it's an inclusive environment, and also folks feel like they're adequately challenged, which I think is important as well. What steps have you taken to ensure your department budget does not cause disproportionate harm to any groups in your community? When issues arise in certain groups, there are specific issues that need to be addressed and dealt with. We do the best we can to provide training, make sure people are aware of those things. We review to make sure those issues are being addressed, and we make sure people get into courtrooms and talk about them and are informed of the law and are aggressive advocates regarding those issues. Have you engaged with or considered the needs of the underserved? Same as above. Budget reductions, I've kind of alluded to these. It's a net loss of one FTE position in our program that is at current unfilled. The professional services reductions were contemplated on a lesser amount of need for professional services, panel expenses, experts, et cetera, because some of that would be built into the conflict office budget as well. Another issue would be in 2025, the state of Washington is going to assume responsibility for providing representation for children in dependency proceedings. We currently have the obligation of providing counsel and reimbursing counsel for that. So that obligation for us will go away in 25. So we've addressed that. Communication, I believe that was per executive and finance direction. I believe every department is going to be proposing that as part of their budget reduction. And reduction in travel dues, et cetera, because of a decrease in staffing and just our spending, monitoring, et cetera. Items in, slide 13. Items in the 22-23 budget not completed. Juvenile resentencing cases. I illustrated the number of cases we were appointed on, the number of cases we've resolved. Essentially 19 are pending because there's appellate review about whether or not you can be resentenced, and if you can be resentenced, what's the scope of what the court can do. So once those decisions get decided, then we can move forward on those as well. Blake cases, there are ongoing issues with Blake cases. We have to date, as of May of 23, we've represented 180 folks on community custody with Blake-related matters and resolved those. We've represented 285 clients who were incarcerated and had Blake convictions, so sentences needed to be adjusted. And we've provided representation to approximately 4,900 folks who needed convictions eradicated or taken away because there were drug convictions. And that still has relevance to folks who are out in the community because it impacts your ability to get certain jobs and rent places, et cetera. And that's ongoing, and I frankly don't know how many more there are going to be. There's been a fairly expedited way of dealing with those with the collaboration of the prosecutor and the court. And in addition, we are anticipating funding from the State Office of Public Defense for those issues, which should address our concerns and needs. Backlog cases, 429 left. We've encompassed those in existing caseloads. They're in the system. They're being managed. We know of what's there once it's assigned to us. We don't know what may still be there. So I'm representing, our understanding of what our workload is today regarding that issue. If that were to somehow change in the future, then I would have a discussion with the executive and likely the council. I think that comes to the end of this presentation, so I'm certainly willing to answer whatever questions you might have to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Director Kawamura. We'll start with Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director, for your presentation. Are any of your employees, do you have any FTEs assigned to the ARPA fund?
No. All of the temporary positions we had, we used limited duration or extra hire, and anticipating the end of the duration, we have moved these folks into vacant positions, and so there will be no impact to any of our staff due to these positions.
Okay. Just trying to make sure we didn't have any unaccounted there, ARPA ones. Do have a question for finance staff, if we could, Julie or Gary. Prosecuting attorney has a 9% increase. Department of Assigned Counsel has a 0.3% decrease in funding. Why would these not see similar increases along that line?
Julie Demuth with the Finance Department. So with the Assigned Counsel budget, in 22-23, they had several temporary positions for Blake that were included in the budget. Those positions were not needed to be continued into 24 and 25, so the budget has a reduction due to those positions going away.
Okay.
There's also the budget reduction that was taken, and then you don't see a larger reduction because we add in the conflict office.
Yeah, what I'm seeing is in 2020, there were 119 in Department of Assigned Counsel FTEs. In 2020, in the Prosecuting Attorney's Office, there were 218, and now we're looking at 240. So a 22% increase to a 9 FTE decrease. So with the decreases we have here, can they keep up? If the prosecutor's office is able to prosecute more cases, that's going to, I don't want to slow them up because we don't have the DAC available. So are we comfortable that we're increasing them both at a comparable rate? Because if one gets too far ahead of the other, it still breaks down.
Yes, I believe we have adequate staffing levels, but I'll let Director Kawamura speak on behalf of Assigned Counsel.
Our budget proposal is premised on the fact that I believe that we have the resources to provide the necessary services at this time based on the projections that we have today. Part of the struggle has been, well, I don't think it's our office or another office. There's a hard time filling positions. And so what's on paper, we have not had a lot of these positions filled for a period of time. And as you come out of COVID and more, you quote unquote get back to reality and the workload gets to be what it normally is or approaching what it normally is, you start realizing that you need those positions and you need them filled. We have been extremely successful in doing that. We have brought in, I think, 6 lawyers a week ago. We're bringing in more, and so many of the positions in our budget are now filled. And I fully believe that we need to fill all of the existing positions we have in order to provide the services that we're required to provide. But given that, I think it puts us in a position where we can do what we're required to do. Again, that's today, and that's the best that I can look at. I don't know what's happening tomorrow, but I'm confident that today, yes, this is a budget that we can provide services.
And you feel that you can meet the increases that we just recently discussed in the prosecutor's office, where they're looking at handling more cases, that you can keep up with that? Not just serve at today's level, but serve at tomorrow's projected levels?
Yeah, well, we're basing our staffing on what filings are. And I'm looking at filings being, it's obviously an anomaly because we had 2 years of an artificial environment, but essentially I'm looking at 2018 and 2019. Then I moved to 22 and 23 as barometers of what's likely to be coming in the next biennium. And based on those projections, I believe that our budget will accommodate the need. And again, if that changes, there's something that happens that I'm not aware of, then my position or opinion might change as well.
Okay. And I know we did have the sheriff here before. He'll be back this afternoon. Talked about going after many of these prolific offenders, which I assume are going to be a lot more difficult to both prosecute and defend, because they'll have, in theory, multiple cases going simultaneously. If there was a sudden surge in some of these high offender, I can't remember the exact name that y'all use, but the someone with a lot of cases going simultaneously, can you handle that?
Well, we're doing that now. I mean, I think when you're talking about a prolific offender, you're talking about someone who's accused of stealing 1 car. It's fairly routine now that we're representing someone that's accused of stealing 10. That's a prolific offender. So that's in our existing caseload. It'll be in the caseload of the conflict office, and that is another delivery system that we could take advantage of as well if that's approved by the council. So
Okay.
my answer is yes.
Well, thank you in your work, in your department for your work. We know that, for the prosecutor and the sheriff to move ahead, it requires you to be working with them. So we want to make sure that we have all the logistics working in concert. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director, for being here today. I have 2 questions. One is specifically about the conflict office. I'm wondering if you have any, data to support, like how many cases would have been referred to this conflict office if we'd had it in 21, 22 or something? And I don't need it today, but it's just a wondering. Now that I understand it better, I read it and I was not sure. So I have a better understanding, but just understanding what it is, because it's several people. So you can follow up later unless you randomly know.
Well,
it.
I can give you rough numbers, because that went into the analysis of what the cost would be and how many attorneys. I would expect this office to accept about 300 cases a year. And that would be about 1/3 of the number of cases that on average we may send out in a year. So I think what that does is like I said, it's not an issue of there aren't any panel attorneys, and there aren't any panel attorneys that are qualified. They're just not available in appropriate numbers. So what this does is it gives us 2 prongs to go to. One is extremely predictable. You know it's going to be there and you know what they can do. The other ones can be variable. So that, in essence, that's why I think this is the best tack to take.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And then my second question is, may not actually be for you, maybe for public or our facilities, is where is this office? Since you said it has to be separate from you, where are they going?
Because of the size of the office, and again, it hasn't been in-depth conversation with facilities, but I was told that because of the size of the office, there is existing or multiple existing spaces that may or may not be currently under lease, et cetera, that could be used. And we did include a lease cost in this projection.
Okay,
But it could not physically be in our office. It has to be separate.
okay. That would be interesting, because I know we're trying to reduce leases, so if it's something we're bringing on, I'd be curious to find out.
Well, and I want to qualify it that, it was very preliminary discussions. I don't think it gets substantive until this is approved, and maybe the term lease is wrong. There may be existing space somewhere but I was told that there are lots of potentials for it.
Okay. It may be something we want to just make sure that we aren't bringing people in with no place for them to go, because that sounds like a horrible working condition. So we want to make sure we take care of our people if we bring them on to do this work. So thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bridges, you'll work with Mr. Taylor to figure that one out, what the current assumption is there. Councilmember Morel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director, for coming here and laying out your budget for us. I'm just kind of curious, and this may be just an elementary question, but you provide legal service to indigent persons accused of crime in Pierce County Superior Court, Pierce County District Court, municipal courts in Tacoma, Gig Harbor, Fur Crest, Ruston, and the juvenile court. How do you excuse me, do you charge for those services? How do you get reimbursed from Fur Crest? Do you?
Their interlocal agreement or contract.
Okay, so if caseload goes up in Fur Crest, you get reimbursed for those?
Absolutely.
Okay. Then my other question is, on the interlocal revenue, you show quite a change. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, I may defer to Ms. DeMuth, but for me, that's probably a lay area as well. And so my understanding is there was just a reclassification of identifying which line item these go into. So basically, some that were in the bottom line went to the top, but there hasn't been really any exponential growth one way or the other, if that's accurate.
Okay, I was just curious to go, whoa, something changed dramatically there, but if that's the explanation, I'm okay with that. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Director Kawamura, I think one last question. Again, knowing the population that you are responsible for serving, I imagine a number of your clients do not speak English as their primary language. Do you have is that a wrong assumption, or do you have a sense of what percentage of your clients do not speak English as their primary language?
I really can't give you a guess. I mean, it's prevalent, but I don't know. I'm not sure I could give you a percentage.
What I'm trying to, it's prevalent is the answer. I don't need I'm not looking for an exact, it's a thing you have to figure out to serve your clients. How do you go about accessing language services for your presumably English-speaking public defenders?
It's getting increasingly difficult. The number of interpreters available are extremely limited, and depending on the language, for example, I was talking to a lawyer that has a client that speaks a dialect it's a South Pacific Island dialect. There's 1 or 2 interpreters available in the entire state. So to attempt to have a conversation with that people is is challenging, to say the least. In addition to having quote-unquote live interpreters that will assist us, we try and take advantage of language line for just interviews and routine conversations. The risk to that is if you're having substantive conversations, they're not court certified. And so, you always have this experience that you ask the client a question, the client talks for 10 minutes, and the interpreter says, yeah, he said it, okay. Well, really? So, but that's an ongoing challenge, and there's a shortage of interpreters. So there's nothing we really can do about that. But yeah, it interferes with communication, which in turn lengthens case outcomes, and you hope that people are understanding where they are and what's going on, and you do the best you can to do that.
Vice Chair Campbell.
Are any of your attorneys multilingual?
Yes, we have some lawyers that speak Spanish. I'm not sure about beyond that, but we do.
And do you work to match up clients with lawyers that have bilingual skills?
To the extent possible, but that's very important, but being able to be qualified under the standards the Supreme Court sets to provide representation in that type of case is mandatory. So if we can match both up, then yes, we'll do that. If we can't, then the attorney who is bilingual then may assist this other attorney in client communication, et cetera. So we try and do that, but we don't have 50 lawyers like that, so it's still a struggle. Yeah.
Do you provide a pay premium for employees that are bilingual or more?
Do not.
Yeah, might be something worth considering to try to attract more, given the downstream savings that you would have from not having to use language lines. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, Director Kawamura, thank you so much for being with us. Your team does really difficult work under high pressure, very challenging situations, but we really do appreciate your leadership. Appreciate you being here to answer our questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. The council is going to take a 10-minute recess. We'll take a 10-minute recess, and we'll resume with the Sheriff's Department to finish our afternoon. So we'll be in recess for Well, welcome back, everyone. The council is back from its afternoon recess. We are still in the committee of the whole for the purposes of budget. And we have for our final discussion, we brought back the Sheriff's Department. Thank you, Sheriff Troyer, and to your command staff for coming back for another follow-up discussion. Your budget's incredibly important to this council, and we wanted to make sure that we could have we ran out of time last time to ask more questions and have more discussions. So thank you again for coming back. Sheriff, if there's opening comments from you, we're happy to hear them. And then we want to get into the questions that we have prepared for follow-up that I believe your Chief of Staff is prepared to begin diving into. Sheriff Troyer.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us and our staff back. And we went through the questions that we got for pretty easy clarification of it's complicated, a lot of it, because we've been in turmoil for a few years with law enforcement and the things we've talked about. We don't know who's coming and who's going and people leaving the state. And as we continue to work on that with the numbers, we've got a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like in the future. I know we tried to convey that last time, but with our patrol chief here, we'll be able to get into further details. So thanks for having us back, and we'll get into it really quick. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 different people presenting their subject matters. And if anybody's got any questions for me before we get going, please ask now.
Questions for Sheriff Troyer before we get to his command staff? I don't see any right now, Sheriff. Thank you for making yourself available. Chief of Staff Wallen to lead us off.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see you all again today. I'm Lauren Wallen. I'm our Chief of Staff for the Sheriff's Department. I'd like to first start off by thanking your staff and all of you for sending us those additional questions. And again, taking out this important time for us to come up and answer these in detail. We're going to start off first off with the questions that were related to animal control and our contract for services with the Humane Society Tacoma Pierce County. The first question that was posed to us is the Humane Society still accepting animals? Yes, they are. As far as our contract goes with them, they're accepting potentially dangerous animals, and then also for cruelty cases. We do know that they have had capacity issues, especially over the last 6 months to year. And we're also seeing that not only for the shelter here, but many other shelters throughout the region are experiencing the same thing. The big issue, is for citizens that are potentially being turned away when they're going to bring in, maybe they want to do an owner surrender, or they're looking at, they have been driving down the road and they found a lost dog, and then they go drive right over to the Humane Society, and the Humane Society now has a new procedure they're doing to try to control the influx of pets and animals that are coming into the shelter. It's a scheduled appointment system. They put that into place with hopes that they could actually take animals instead of just telling people no, that they're full, to try to kind of regulate the number that were coming in on any given day. So what's been happening is that, again, citizens, maybe they find a dog running along the side of the road, they scoop that dog up, take it to the Humane Society, and then are asked, do you have an appointment? When they're told no, they're told that they can't take the dog at that time, so basically to go back home and take care of that dog and schedule an appointment when you can come in. Sometimes that's a couple of days later, but that is the new policy that they've put into place. One of the other important things to also note with the Humane Societies, they're struggling with capacity issues, is that over the last few months, there's been some highly communicable diseases that have been going through the shelters. I know the kennel cough is kind of one of the layman terms for that, where they have to move dogs around from one area to another. Maybe they can't have them all in the same space. So that has also limited their capacity. In a recent meeting we had with the Humane Society leadership, this was approximately 2 to 3 months ago, they talked about some new measures that they were taking into place to try to deal with these issues. One of those was that they were redefining what it meant to be at capacity. Previously, they were doing 100% is capacity. Now they're looking more at like the 80 to 90% range as being capacity. So then they have room to take those cases that we're looking at that are the cruelty, the animal fight, the like kind of dog fighting type situations, or these dogs that are deemed as dangerous or potentially dangerous animals. And that they're the things that they're really required to take both contractually and just out of that kind of safety issue for the community. Also to prevent things like if they're at 100% capacity and then they have a highly communicable disease that goes through the kennel, they don't have anywhere that they can move them in isolation. So those are some new things that they've put into place, as well as that intake policy that we discussed. The second question was, have the hours for accepting animals been reduced? Not for us at the Sheriff's Department. That's part of our contract, that we're able to bring in animals basically at any time. But as I mentioned, that those hours have changed in terms of that system of members of the public having to schedule appointments in order to either do an owner surrender or to return a lost animal that's been found. What other service levels have decreased at the Humane Society was the third question. I think I kind of answered that again, that kennel space and the ability for either owner surrender or that drop off of animals in a timely manner and having to wait for an appointment. One of the things that was recently requested of our animal control staff that is a little bit of a change is the Humane Society asked us if it was possible for our staff to give them 24 to 48 hours notice when we would be bringing in an animal. That's just not something we're able to do. We're reactive, we're not proactive, so we're not really able to schedule that ahead of time. We're also not in a position where we would be able to somehow keep control and take care of that animal during that time frame. The fourth question that was submitted is, what is happening with the animals that are being held at the Humane Society? I'm not sure if this was in reference to adoption or euthanization, so if we have any additional details on what that question was, I just want to make sure that we're accurately answering that question.
Which member asked this question?
That's a good question. I don't remember the context in which I was asking it, if I've returned to that.
Okay.
Yeah, let me reflect on that, because, all right, thank you.
Perfect, and you can get back to me later on also. I'd be happy to answer any of those questions. The fifth question was, if the funding request for the Humane Society is declined, are there any other departments who could manage the services? I interpreted that question as being facilities that would handle those services. And kind of the short answer is no, unfortunately. There is only one other shelter that is in Pierce County. That's Metro Animal Services Shelter that's in Puyallup. They only have 12 kennels to serve all of the many small cities and towns that they provide services for. And from what I'm hearing from our animal control staff, including an update this morning, they're in the same situation that the Tacoma Humane Society is in, where they are basically overflowing with dogs and cats, and also have the kind of the same issues with those communicable diseases, and trying to make sure that they're managing that as well.
I think Chief Jackson might have room, maybe, at her. No, Chief? You don't, no?
I will reserve comment for Chief Jackson's portion of the presentation. We do know that the Metro Animal Shelter, that even if they did not have capacity issues, they would not be able to handle the workload that we have for unincorporated Pierce County. And I'm sorry, I'm still laughing inside at that comment, so I'm sorry, Patty. We do know that other area shelters, Kent, Lacey, and Silverdale, all have Humane Society type shelters that are there. I cannot speak to what their capacity is right now. I would imagine it's pretty similar, just in other news stories that I've seen, and it's something that we kind of keep an eye on when we see those being reported. And certainly I know I've seen information that's been circulated about them doing some similar kind of adoption pushes like we saw at the Tacoma Humane Society approximately 2 months ago, where they waived a lot of the adoption fees. I know that was highly successful for them in terms of clearing space, but of course there is cost associated with that, and they are a nonprofit organization. One of the things that we don't know about those facilities, like I said, is I don't know what their capacity is. I don't know what their availability would be, but a lot of those you're looking 20 to 25 miles for us to drive out and then to come back. So logistically, there would be some pretty serious challenges with that. So I want to make sure if we answered all the questions in regards to Humane Society.
So questions on animal control, Humane Society. We'll start with Councilmember Denson.
Yes, Councilmember Campbell may not remember his question, but it prompted me to ask, is this a no-kill shelter, or do they euthanize? I'm just curious what they do.
So I got the answer this morning in case it was about euthanization. So currently, they do euthanizations, but only if there is a court order that is requiring that. So that's going to be for those dangerous animals or potentially dangerous animals. I do know that the Humane Society has a committee that determines if an animal could be euthanized or adopted out if it's something that's not at that court order type requirement.
Okay, I have one other question, and you may not be able to answer this, but I have a friend who volunteers at the Humane Society, and she was telling me about some sort of regulation, I don't know if it's the city of Tacoma or if it's Pierce County, that defines if it's deemed a dangerous animal, if they have to be adopted in a different county, or does it sound familiar to you at all? Because I'm just thinking, if you've got dangerous animals, they're obviously even more difficult to move. Do they have to move outside of Pierce County?
So my understanding, and I would really need to confirm this with our animal control folks, but my understanding is once that has been declared and determined as a dangerous animal, it should not be adopted out. And there is tremendous liability involved in that. But I would really need to get the specifics from our folks.
It was
in animal
confusing
control.
to try and figure out. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you, and I think I figured out my question here. So I'd been hearing that there were problems with getting animals in, that people were being turned away from dropping them off. So I think my question was, what are happening to animals that we're holding on to if the Humane Society's not accepting them? Sounds like we're able to be accepted at almost any time, any place.
Yeah, because of our contract, they are taking the animals when we bring them in. What you're alluding to was more of what was also discussed earlier, that there are residents of Pierce County, again, who are being turned away when they're going because they don't have an appointment and the facility's at capacity.
Now, they turn around then and calling animal control and saying, I didn't mean to have this dog. I now have this dog. I didn't mean to have this kitten. I just vacuumed it up. Now I have a kitten. What do I do with it? It's a whole nother thing from this morning.
I am aware that they have received calls similar to that. And that is a challenge because people, out of the goodness of their heart, are, picking up a dog or cat they see on the side of the road, not with the intention of, I'm going to go take this home, and what am I going to go do with it? So that continues to be a challenge, and we hope that the Humane Society and some of the new policies and procedures that they're putting into place, we hope that it will get beyond that point, but I understand it's a point of frustration for community members.
Hopefully, maybe as we talk through the contracts with this, we can get to where if we call and say, hey, so-and-so's bringing one in, will you take them? So we don't have to go pick it up, and then we have to take it, and then that, because that's adding to our workload when we have, so would hope that we can get that. But I do remain concerned about the high increase they've had in costs to what they're charging us, while their availability is becoming more and more constrained. So it is something that I'm definitely going to want to keep a watch on over the next biennium, because we've seen high double-digit increases over the last 4 or 5 years. But without, they still accept our animals, that's great, but they're still doing what they did for us before. So.
Yeah. We have at times been surprised with some of the numbers that they've come back to us when we've looked at year-to-year contract negotiations. When we hear amounts like 19% increase next year, a 15% increase next year. So we consider very fortunate or blessed that we were able to negotiate that down to 5% while still retaining the services that we were getting. But yeah, we've been surprised at times. We understand they've cited staffing costs, supply costs, veterinary costs, medical costs. So we understand that that's, across the board, that's cost of doing business. We certainly see that with our jail medical costs, and we see that with our personal medical costs as well. But it's been at times very surprising for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Coover?
Thank you, Chair. I was curious, I had heard somewhere in the back of my mind that they had contracted to take animals from outside of the county or outside of the state even. Is that accurate, or is it all specifically for Pierce County?
Yep, and that's a great question, and that was actually a question that I had posed to their new leadership when I met with them earlier this summer. And part of that I had asked was, are you currently taking animals from outside of the area and then adopting them out? And they said that the only times that they ever do that is if they have an animal that for whatever reason they've been trying to adopt out for a long time here locally, and maybe there's another shelter that has an animal there that they haven't been able to adopt out. They kind of do a swap to try to see if, didn't go in that, wasn't adopted in that community, but perhaps it will be adopted within this one. But they have told us that they're not doing anything like accepting, 20 dogs from Texas that they're going to try to adopt out, or a bunch of cats from King County. They had assured us that they were not doing that. They were not in any position to do that and would not be doing it otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair Kimball?
Moving away from the Humane Society, or maybe it's still within them, so animal control handles a wide variety of animals, not just cats and dogs. With like horses, I know we've had to seize horses in the past, and we've had places that are providing terrible care for horses. How do we do? Those don't go to the Humane Society, do they? Or
They don't.
What's our process on
They don't. We've got separate locations within Pierce County that have been identified for care of livestock, specifically things like llamas and horses and goats and any of those types of things. So we do have facilities that they go to as well, but not the Humane Society. Humane Society is primarily for dogs, cats, and rabbits, and rodents.
bunnies? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wallen, I think those are all the questions on animal control. We're ready for the next section.
Okay, very good. The next section I will also be covering, which is going to be questions about ARPA funds and hiring incentives. Give me one moment here to switch over my notes. Okay, so the first question that we had was, according to the executive's proposal, about $3.5 million of the $4 million of ARPA dollars was allocated for hiring and retention bonuses will be paid by the end of the year. Is this correct? So for law enforcement retention, ARPA funds, It's important to note that the only things that ARPA funds were used for was not for any of the recruiting incentives. Up to this date, it's only been to pay for law enforcement retention bonuses. All of the other incentives that were paid for in corrections and in law enforcement for the department were paid for using general fund vacancy savings up to this point. The retention bonuses were split into two payments of $5,000. The first was in 2002, and the second was in 2023. Of that, $3.52 million was spent during the biennium. Benefits were included in those payment amounts, and there was 585 installments of $5,000 that were paid out of the ARPA funds. The second question was, please provide the actual number of persons who have received incentive payments broken down by type of incentive and amount during the current biennium. For the law enforcement hiring incentives, 45 people received that to the tune of $397,500. For the law enforcement referral incentives, there was 11 bonuses totaling $55,000. The corrections hiring incentives, there was 21 people that received that. It was $175,000. For the corrections referral incentives, there was 7 bonuses totaling $35,000. The third question that was asked was separately provide the same information for anticipated payments for the remainder of 2023. For law enforcement anticipated hiring incentives, it's $109,500. And for corrections anticipated hiring incentives, it's $112,500. And I know that we're throwing out a lot of details and numbers in this. We'd be happy to provide this to council staff in an email as well, which
Yes,
I think
please.
is helpful for everyone.
Yes, please. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you again. When you guys were here last week, I think Sheriff talked about at least 5 people who'd gone somewhere else, found out, you know what, really, I want to be a Pierce County Sheriff if I come back. Do they get the transfer bonus?
No. Correct? No.
So what would they qualify under, just the retention bonus of the 10K, but they wouldn't be eligible for the 25?
They do retention?
They were here at the time
Yeah.
that specified in the contract.
Okay, but if,
They got the privilege of working for our department again.
okay. Thank you.
All right.
Could we, Mr. Bridges, do we understand the flow of the funds for the bonuses in the proposal? Okay. Vice Chair Campbell?
Thank you, Chair.
We understand as best as we can now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, very good. For the next questions that were in regards to patrol staffing and precincts, I'm going to invite up Chief Michael Lundborg to handle that portion. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Chief Wallen.
Thanks for having me. I thought I timed this right by going on vacation last week, but apparently not good enough, so couldn't take another one quick enough. But no, I believe I have your questions here in front of me, and I think I'll just read them and let you follow up with anything else you might have. The first question that was presented to me is, what is the Juvenile Justice Investigation Program, and why was it cut by 94%? So the Juvenile Justice Investigation Program is actually part of the Criminal Investigations Bureau. There were 3 deputy investigator positions that were assigned to juvenile investigations. So those 3 deputies would handle all of the, essentially, anytime a juvenile was a suspect in a case outside of a homicide, juvenile investigators would handle the investigation. And that would also include runaways and those types of incidents. We hadn't filled those positions for several years. As soon as the staffing challenges started to arise, we moved people from those, put them back into deputy patrol positions. So since they weren't being filled, that was why that was cut. And I think the 6% remaining is the fleet non-personnel costs that remain with the positions. The second question I have, please explain the funding increases per precinct. And while we don't actually budget by the precinct, our numbers do differ based on staffing levels for those work locations. As you all know, and I'm sure you're aware, the salary increases that came with the compensation package for the Sheriff's Department, Law Enforcement and Corrections does make a sizable impact to the budget over the past 3 years and continuing on into 24 and looking ahead at 25 and projecting what some of those expenses could look like. Additionally, the workers' compensation costs that have become so great, those are added in there, deferred compensation costs, overtime rates are included, and then even some special pay for some of the special units. You know, we look at that and put those numbers in as well. The third question, please provide the staffing levels per precinct. So these numbers are based on, I guess, today or yesterday when I was putting things together. Out of our Central Patrol precinct, or our South Hill precinct, which encompasses the Parkland Spanaway area as well. So I guess that's the next question. But Central Patrol is our districts 1 through 7, and that includes Parkland Spanaway. There are 55 deputies currently assigned to work out of Central Patrol. So broken down, it's roughly 18 deputies on day shift, 20 on swing shift, and 17 on the grave shift. Also included are 4 canine handlers, our traffic unit, which currently has 10, and that includes the sergeant. And I apologize, I did not include like the major, the 4 patrol lieutenants, and the 10 sergeants as well in that number. I just used the 55 as the patrol deputies. Our school resource officers work out of patrol even though they're a contract. There are 10 school resource officers. That includes the sergeant. So there are 4 assigned to Bethel School District, 2 assigned to the Franklin Pierce School District, and 3 assigned to the Puyallup School District. In our detachments, currently the Mountain Detachment has 20 people assigned to it, and that does include 1 lieutenant and 2 sergeants. And so then 17, I guess, is the number of actual patrol people. And those are usually broken up like about 6 deputies on day shift, 5 on swing shift, and 5 on graveyard, with an additional investigator deputy who works day shift. So it's usually 6, 5, and 5, plus the extra investigator. The D12 Foothills Detachment has 21, and that is the lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and again, they go 6, 6, and 6. But they've got someone, well, all of these typically have someone who's either out on an injury, FMLA, military leave. So most places have somebody who's gone at least one position. Our D14, the Peninsula, D14, D15, they have 21. Again, 1 lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and then the 6, 6, and 5. And our contracts. University Place currently has 16. Edgewood is short a chief right now. I'm sure most of you heard. If you didn't, Chief Mark Berry, who is our Edgewood chief, took a job as the new chief of police for the Bonnie Lake Police Department. Good for him, tough for us. So Edgewood is currently, they're open for a new chief position, and the process, the applications just closed. We have 4 applicants for it, and next week, hopefully, we'll be deciding who that new chief will be. There are 11 of them right now, and there should be 14. Pierce Transit PD has a chief and a deputy investigator. And then I did include just SIU code, CLD, and proactive property crimes, just because they work so closely with our patrol people, but they're part of CIB. We have 1 lieutenant and 1 sergeant in SIU, 4 deputy positions. There are 3 with code and CLD, and 1 detective sergeant and 2 deputies in the proactive property crimes unit. But again, there are some people out on leave in those positions. The next question I have is, how does the sheriff determine staffing levels at the detachments and precincts, specifically the Peninsula Detachment? And do we use metrics like calls for service or wait times? So it's up to the sheriff. It's kind of his purview is how he wants our department to look. But obviously, we do have, you know, kind of a method to our madness on how we staff our positions. I believe call volume is probably one of the biggest drivers of decision-making. But the types of calls that we have as well are very important. So the numbers of high-priority calls will help determine where we're going to put people. Officer safety things that are factored into that in terms of, you know, backup and volume. Pending times, response times, all of that plays a part of it. But I have to be honest with you and say that it's been very much the same since throughout the years. I think it was back in around 2004 is when we finally staffed all of our detachments, 24-hour coverage. It used to stop at about, I think it was 2 in the morning, and then we'd cover, from Central Patrol, we'd cover the detachments until 6 a.m. And as long as I've been working here, our graveyard staffing has been a minimum of 6. And so those numbers have not changed. But we staff a minimum staffing of 7 on day shift, a minimum staffing of 8 on swing shift, and then again 6 on graveyard. And really it's right now it's based on the numbers we have to pull from on where we can put people. Detachments, UP, and our detachments have a 2-person minimum staffing, and Edgewood has a 1-person minimum staffing. It is not ideal. We recognize that, but it's what we can afford with our people and our personnel and where they go. But again, we look at call volume, types of calls, the priority levels of calls, the pending times, and so all those do play a part of that. I did happen to note here, I pulled some statistics, and I'll just kind of veer off just a little bit for you, Councilmember Denson. For the Peninsula Detachment, just looking at calls for service for the past 8 years, from 2016 to this year to date, the Peninsula Detachment has had the least amount of calls for service out of the 3 detachments, 6 out of the last 8 years. I don't know if that helps or if that answers a question for you that you might have had. But just wanted to share that. And then I guess the other thing that is probably worth noting, I think it was roughly 5 years ago, the Sheriff's Department did do a staffing study with an outside consultant to look at what our staffing levels look like and what they probably should look like to be ideal. And if I remember correctly, the recommended number of deputies to be increased into our department was about 70, and I don't believe that number includes the promoted positions to supervise those positions as well. So we're probably a little light. Next question is, please provide the Parkland-Spanaway Precinct budget. And again, the Parkland-Spanaway Precinct isn't necessarily a specific budget location because it's a footprint of our agency. It gives us, a connection to the community in the Parkland-Spanaway area. It is a community presence for us, for the citizens, a place where people can come and utilize the Moran Room to meet. We can do training there. We can have community meetings. People can rent that out. Other agencies come there and use it for the DUI station, the Drager, or the phlebotomy room, to use the holding stations, the holding cells. Deputies can write reports there, eat lunch, use the facilities, book property, so they don't have to go all the way back to South Hill. And so it is just a footprint for us. It's a place within the community, so there isn't a specific budget that goes just to the Parkland-Spanaway precinct. It's not like deputies necessarily work out of there. They come and go from there, but it's part of Central Patrol, so that's where that fits. And we do have 2 lieutenants on site there, and there is, our co-responders work out of there. CLD, I believe, is being moved back into that work location. Traffic works out of there, and our co-responders, 2 lieutenants, and then animal control. Sorry, that was the other one. And the last question was, do you provide law enforcement for county parks? And are the deputies coming from patrol? And yes, yes, and yes. We do provide law enforcement for county parks. It is on an overtime basis at this point. And they do come from patrol, but they may come from investigations because it's overtime. The 2 parks that we typically work will be up at Lake Tapps, North Lake County Park, and that is usually just during the summer. And those positions are filled on an overtime basis. And the positions, when they can't be filled by all of patrol, will be opened up to, detectives if they want to work it. The sergeants have worked it, lieutenants have worked it when we've needed to fill positions and we haven't been able to find anyone to do it. So it does open up to others within the agency. And then Fantasy Lights at Spanaway Lake. We'll have deputies work that as well, again, on an overtime basis. But those ones are usually there's not as many people who work that, and so it's a select few who seem to do it on a regular basis. But again, it is overtime. It's not a contract. And we know that earlier in the year, there was talk of could we contract for doing park patrol? And as much as we'd like to say, yes, we would love to do that, it's just difficult with our staffing right now, and we know that Edgewood and UP would really like more deputies to be working in their areas too, and our schools would like more contracted school resource officers to work for them, and I wouldn't doubt that Pierce Transit would want even more as well. But I think those are the questions you asked, and I hope I've answered your questions, but if you have follow-up,
Thank you, Chief
I
Lundberg.
think I'm ready.
I'm certain there is follow-up. Thank you very much. Councilmember Denson.
Yes, thank you, Chief. Thank you for looking into the information at the Peninsula Detachment. I'm sure you all get the same feedback that I get all the time about not enough deputies. We love our deputies that are out there. I know Deputy Wilder and Deputy Betts well. They've been in the community for a long time. They both live in the community. We'd like more of them. Yeah. And I hear that, and my predecessors have heard that as well. I completely understand your position with your staffing levels and obviously looking at the number of calls. And this is not really a question, it's a comment.
Nope,
I know
okay.
you appreciate just the topography we have and all of the water. There's no straight shot anywhere. If you're on Fox Island or one of our deputies is on Fox Island and they have to go to the KP, you're talking about 45 minutes to an hour or more because they've got to go all the way around. And so it's also that response time that you mentioned that's important. So in the future, as obviously you guys are getting staffed up, which I listened to the recording the other day, and it sounds like you're making great progress bringing on new deputies. Hopefully you'll think of all the detachments and as well as the central services and bringing more service. I guess the last thing I'll mention is, in addition to responding to services, our constituents just would like to see the deputies, driving around the neighborhoods more and in the community. And I know they're doing as best they can because they're responding to calls and they're doing the required paperwork. But I think there's a lot of prevention that can happen and just community engagement when they have time to be more present, which of course is a function of having more deputies. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
And I'll just follow up to your statement. And I really appreciate, sharing what you're saying because that is what we hear on a regular basis. And we can't hear it enough. One of the things I'm really proud of Lieutenant Wilder for taking over the detachment this past year is some of the community engagement that he has been part of now. I know he's joining the local Rotary. He's made some great relationships with some of our fire departments. There have been some, we don't always get along. We don't see things the same way. And he has done a great job of building some of those bridges. And some of the comments I've received from fire about what he has done with the officers there and how they're able to work with some of the mental health problems that they've had and transports, and that's really great news for me to hear that. And then along those same lines is because we know the officers in the detachments are busy and they do have to drive 45 minutes to get from point A to point B, that when he's available to make some of those community meetings and do some of those engagements, it's that much more powerful because he is the head of the agency, so to speak, out in the detachment. And so he's the face people see, and he's the one they get to speak with, and he gets the ear of the staff that works for him. And so, and yes, and Deputy Betts being the investigator, being so involved with so many different things, he's doing a great job, and if we can, just make more of them.
Exactly. We're happy with who we have.
Yep,
We just like more of them.
I agree. I'll do my best.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a number of other questions. Councilmember Herrera.
Thank you, Chair. I remember a long time ago when we used to have Metro Parks Police. That was a long time ago.
Yes, I remember.
But that was, I think, federal grants a long time ago. But my question today is on the specialty pay. He said it's rolled in to the budget. Is that like capped to where you can only have so many divers, so many swiftwater people, or language specialty officers?
Yeah, there is a cap to the number of team members. Now, some of the nice things about like the dive team, it's a Metro team. Search and rescue is Metro. So having additional people from other agencies, provides extra bodies at a cost not necessarily to our agency, because those agencies will supply those positions and the equipment that goes with it. But call outs and things that go with that, the more people you have on your own agency, or if it's just our agency responding, yes, we're going to feel those effects of those calls more. But when you spread it out in a Metro, that worked well in dive, that worked well in swiftwater, some search and rescue things, but I don't know if it's for everybody.
Specifically to the language, is there specialty pay for language people who have secondary?
In our agency, we do not have any specialty pay for language.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Cruver.
Thank you, Chair. I thought for a moment when you were describing the Parkland precinct that they were using the space as a lobotomy room.
Oh.
Phlebotomy.
I hope it's not a lobotomy room.
It's like, wow. My question is, you had mentioned that there were 4 K-9 units.
Correct.
Is that enough, or is that something that would be a good investment?
Being a former canine handler myself, I love the position, and I know that lots of people would love to do that position. I would love to say, let's make more of those. We need more of those. But we're currently reimagining what canine looks like, because things changed in some of the legislative changes about how we respond to certain calls, and one of the things that we recognize with canine, it's one of the greatest de-escalation tools that we have, because a simple bark is a lot for someone just to say, you know what, that's enough, and no force is ever used, and that's a great tool to have at our disposal. Bringing more of those in sounds like a great plan, but they're also very expensive, and there is a liability that goes with them, and we recognize that. Canine is also a Metro position, and so Tacoma has dogs, and Lakewood has dogs, and Puyallup has dogs, and so right now to say we need more canine units, I need more patrol people, and we have a sufficient number of canine at this point. I'd love to reimagine or revisit the conversation in the future, but I appreciate the fact that you're recognizing the importance of canine and what it means to this profession. But I think right now we're probably okay with what we have.
I just was thinking in terms if they are preventing more things that cause more damage, that would be a worthy investment. But if you're okay with what you have
Yeah,
on a scale of 1 to 10.
Those guys will all be mad at me for saying that. I mean, because I know they would like to have more, and deputies would like to get that opportunity to be in that role. But right now, I think with what we have is probably the appropriate number. And again, I look to this profession as we're coming back. I mean, people know the importance of this profession and the importance of the role of a professional police agency or sheriff's department. And doing what we do is vital to our community safety. And so I want to do this and do this right and bring these people back. We're bringing people on, and they're good people, and I want to make this place shine. And then hopefully then we look at, okay, we've got the numbers. Maybe we need another canine position because the communities are growing, and there's lots of work out there. So, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the clarification on the Parkland Spanaway. That was my question. I've had a lot of people like, why isn't anyone there and why aren't they in the budget? And they really actually do want to. So maybe in future budgets, we could outline that a little clearer so that I have an official document as opposed to what just I'm saying. My question is about, as we're hiring, we have all these different areas that we all have need. Let's say tomorrow we get to pin 10 new officers. Yay, it happened. Do you guys have a formula for how you divide them up between them? Like, or do you go to where the need is as far as the different departments? And I know that's not in your maybe complete control, but just wondering, is there a methodology?
So I guess the quick answer right now is we commission 10 people, and they go through their FTO period and they come out. Right now, the way the numbers are, they go to South Hill because they're just assigned to Central Patrol immediately, and then we look at who has the greatest need now. We've been providing credits to some of our contracts with Edgewood and UP. Edgewood's with 1 deputy as a minimum staffing right now, and I mean, you cringe when you hear numbers like that. University Place is a busy place, and they are working 2 people minimums, and and part of it is how they've set up their contracts, and so that's on them. If they want it bigger, they're going to try to hire more deputies. They want us to hire more deputies so they can bring more people on. But it's a matter of trying to figure out where those needs are. And I look at those detachments and I say, I've got 740 square miles or 540 square miles, and then another, 200 some square miles with one way in, one way out in the peninsula. Those numbers need to increase. The populations in those areas are expanding rapidly. And then we look at, who is available to help in our detachments. We work well with Mason County and Kitsap County. We've developed relationships with Fish and Game and State Patrol because sometimes those are going to be our backups. Out in our mountain detachment, we've got, Eatonville and Roy. Well, Roy's doesn't always have someone working, and Eatonville doesn't always have someone working. So we're covering for those agencies if they're not there. So they don't really have the backup that maybe some of the other places might. And then the foothills detachments are so busy with the expansion and the growth of that area out there. I mean, it's new cities being developed yearly. So the challenges of working in those remote areas with a minimum staffing of 2 is just harder and harder. But to up that staffing level by 1 over those 3 shifts, I think we say it's about 15 deputies to increase the minimum staffing by 1. That's a lot of people in each area. And so those are the challenges that we're going to continuously face. But it's being
where we are.
Yeah, and that's where we are, and that's the hard part. Okay. So I guess the quick answer to your question is they come into Central Patrol, then we look at where the needs are greatest. If we have holes that have to be filled or need to be filled because of staffing levels for safety, then we look at the call volume metrics and the high priorities of who needs this body more. So I look forward to these problems. I haven't seen it for a while.
Thank you. That is helpful. My second question is, how many more deputies would we have to hire before we could get community liaison officers? I really miss them in the community as far as that preventative and kind of what we've got going on the Key Pen in part.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at, 55 deputies being short just Central Patrol by some 20 deputies, that's where, I need to get up beyond that, 60 number before I feel like I can start pushing people back into the detachments. I need to get people into my contracts. I need to keep my people safe, and the numbers are going to have to be great. And the biggest challenge for us is, we can hire 10 people today, but it's going to take at a minimum 11 to 14 months to get these people out on the street to where they become an actual helpful position. And so the year delay for everything is just tough. We're getting, retirement notices. I hit 30 years in January. I got hired with 54 people in a levy. So 54 of us got hired in 1 year, and we're hitting 30 years next year. Now, all 54 of us are not still around, but they're starting to go and going in these big bunches. This year, we've had 17 projected retirements. If I count Chief Barry, right now, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, potentially 9 going by January that are not all accounted for in these projected retirements. I've got 2 coming back to patrol, being released from FTO training in November, 2 in December, and then 2 in February, 6 in April, and then there's a pause between April and July. And it's tough. We were expecting 4 to be released in November, and 2 have quit. And so they go through the academy, they go through their training, and then they say, you know what, this job is not for me. And those are the tough ones, because we're expecting them to come, and they realize that this isn't all it's cracked up to be for some.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Definitely need your team
What's that?
well-trained.
Oh, yeah. We do have 2 back in our community liaison deputy position. We did put 2 back in there. I apologize. I missed that part.
Okay.
So we kept Deputy Papin, who was in our code enforcement position with Public Works. We did put 2 back into CLD. And that's actually one of the things that I'd kind of set aside for another PowerPoint, and then I was told, don't do that PowerPoint, just answer their questions. So the power of what these guys are doing, the impact they're making for our communities is that great, because it's taking a tremendous amount of work off of our deputies in those areas. Tacoma and Puyallup and Fife and Lakewood had all done a big push on some of the problem transient camps, and we, without having anybody in our position, they came to the path of least resistance, and people started settling in unincorporated Pierce County, and we were playing catch up, and we put 2 guys back into the position, and it was at a cost to our patrol people because we had to pull from patrol to put them back, but they have made an impact. I can give you information. I'm sure your constituents might have reached out to you, but just some great work that they have done to help clean up some problem areas. And so I'm glad to say yes,
Thank you.
there are some CLDs out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you. I hear the concerns of some of my colleagues about staffing in their communities and response times. For the communities of Dash Point, Brown Point, Five Heights, how many deputies do you have assigned to them directly?
I think I got a call. No, I have. You're right. When we look at the call volumes, and
the answer is 0.
The answer is 0, sir. Typically, it's part of District 4, and back in the day, it was called a 4A and a 4B, and when staffing allowed, they would staff someone up there. We don't have a whole lot of luxury of that right now. And so, again, when we look at where are the priority calls, they're staying in the main part. And I know why your constituents are frustrated with that. I hear it, as do you.
Yes. But primarily, they dispatch then out of the South Hill precinct.
They will come out of the Central Patrol. I know when I was up in Edgewood in the middle of the night, Edgewood deputies would respond to assist at times if they didn't have anything going on, just because they knew that Central Patrol was really tied up. But
There's one out of District 4, not out of South Hill.
what's that?
There's one out of District 4, not out of South Hill.
Yes, they're coming out of district. The undersheriff is saying that deputies responding up to Dash Point, Browns Point, are coming out of District 4, which is the northern district.
Okay.
I just use South Hill as kind of the South Hill precinct. That's where District 4 is. That's where it's based out of. That's where they're coming from. But backup may be coming from another Parkland, Spanaway, depending on, what the call might be. So.
Thank you for that. I don't know if we'd have to answer this in, almost certain we wouldn't have to answer it in the next biennium, but there's some discussion around South Hill becoming its own city. Would we need to then move our detachment there to unincorporated Pierce County?
No, I don't believe so, and simply because, we have a portion of our agency works out of downtown Tacoma. So you can be in another location. It's nice to be situated within the areas in which you patrol, but.
And we may feel some pressure to be in areas that aren't incorporated and all that, but that's not happening today. You have some members who are off on military leave.
Yes.
How many members within the Sheriff's Department, if you don't know this off the top of your head, are eligible for recall if there was a quick scaling up of our overseas military?
I don't have an answer for that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, might be a good one to have a pulse on right about now. You're going to go off the hook because I can't read my own handwriting here. So, actually, I do know what this means. When we were talking last time, what we're asking for new deputies in this budget is actually almost a decrease in numbers to a more realistic as to what we're likely to actually recruit. But the sheriff and others said, but if we fill all those, we're coming back for more and are hopeful that you can come back for more. But when do you think that might be? Do you really feel like this will be all that you'll need, or are we really going to have to come back and try to find another 10 in the second year?
This is a tough question for me to answer. I don't work in our administrative bureau, so I don't oversee hiring and training and background. But we know that we're making improvements on our process. Some of the things that we knew have been slowing us down a bit. And, we've taken an extra person, put someone else into background, just trying to help with the investigations and background investigations so we can hire quicker, do something different to hire more people faster. We're losing great people to other agencies because they're just getting picked up. We've changed our testing, we've changed some of our processes, and we're still learning and adapting. I truly believe we can hire 60 to 70 people next year. It's going to take work, it's going to take effort, but I believe we can get there. But I also know that they've already got 5 people or 4 people planning on leaving in 2025, and I know there's more. Again, my hire group is at that 30 years, and there's people above me in time on. So we're going to lose people. This is a weird business. We had people just flee in 2021, and does that happen again? I don't know. I hope not. But I'd like to see people coming back, and we're starting to see that, and I want to nurture that, and I want to bring people back. This is been the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my entire life, and I love this position. I love what we get to do with the public. I love service, and I want to bring people on who want to do this with the same passion. It's just a matter of getting them through this process. It's long, we know it, but it's going to happen. And if we set those goals right, I know we can do it. So hang on. If I can come back and ask for more, I'm going to come back and ask for more.
Well, that's what you all, that's what I'm saying. I'll come back and ask for more, but if we've spent the money and now we're going to have to lay off in other departments in order to achieve that, we need to have a sense of that. And so if y'all can give that a little bit more thinking of what you might see yourselves coming back asking for, particularly since a new budgeting quirk has been overlaid of pre-expending vacancy savings, then we don't even have the savings that would normally be used in that situation.
And
so we're going to be put in a really tight situation. Like you say, it's a weird business. Budgeting for your weird business is tricky, but we want to make sure we get it right so that if you do want to come to us and say, hey, we got everyone filled, we got another class ready to go, we want to be able to say yes, but we need to be able to prepare for that 24 plus months out, 30 months out. So
yes, yeah, I apologize. I understand your question, and I just get a little excited about it. And I want it's tough for us to see cuts to budget because I know I can fill those positions. It's going to take a little bit of time, but there's also reasons we need to do what we need to do right now, budgetary wise. One of the great things about this position is we're not going to solve all the problems of Pierce County from the law enforcement perspective alone. It takes the village. It takes all of us to come together and work together. So as much as I'd like to say, yes, give me all your money, we know that's not going to work. We have to spread this out. And so it's a team effort, and I apologize if I got a little excited about that.
We need prevention and intervention.
Yeah.
In addition to
Absolutely.
what you all do.
Chair, thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming here and all your answers.
Thanks, sir.
Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I was just curious, did you have to take out a minor's work permit when you got hired?
I was 23, so yes, I was young. I felt really young.
Young and didn't know any better, so here you are.
Yes.
So, thank you. I just want to give you and your department kudos for the job that you've done under difficult situations. I've been in this position for 5 years now, going on, and mainly these, I have not received such a low volume of calls from my plateau people as I have this year. Lake Taps was like crickets. And, well, I'm just saying.
So you've got extra staffing up there.
Well,
That's what I just heard.
I was gonna touch on that as I work through this, but I mean, the deputies are up there. I know they're up there. I actually had a call from someone from Wilkeson that was wondering why a Pierce County Sheriff's car was going up towards Carbon River. So I know, you do get up there.
Yes, we do.
So, I appreciate, the work you do, obviously, and sure, can we do more? We can always do more. I appreciate the fact of tightening down your budget. Since I've been here, you've always had vacancy savings to the tune of, we started looking at it and going, what could we budget out of, 1.2 million in vacancy savings? So I think tightening that down is reasonable. I think if we do reach a point where we've reached staffing levels, we'll come up with some way of dealing with that. But the other issue that I did want to touch base, you had gave some manning levels out, and I just want to make sure that I've got them correct. You said 7 on swing, 8 on day, and 6 on graveyard.
7 on day shift, 8 on swing shift, 6 on graveyard.
6 on graveyard.
8 on swing shift, 7 on day shift.
Okay. And then obviously some of your battalion took, you don't have that many people.
Right.
So-
And just for clarification, just so, every day is not at those minimum staffing levels. It's dependent upon, training, vacations, sick leave. So there may be a day with 14 people working on swing shift. And those are great days because you've got a couple of people in, each district, roving cars throughout parts of the county. And those are our blessed days. But there are many days that are at that minimum staffing. And so, like, I looked at my computer screen just before I came up here, just to kind of give myself a glance of what it looks like. I think there were 7 pending calls in kind of the Puyallup to Canyon Road area in one district. The other day when I was driving home, District 7, which is our, 47,000 residents, which is bigger than Puyallup and about the size of Lakewood, with 1 deputy working there, and there are 13 pending calls when I was heading home. People are going to wait for those calls. And now, as long as those other districts can finish their calls and help out with priorities in District 7, they'll do that. But they just wait. People have to wait, and that's tough. And, we
Yeah,
get it.
especially on the property crime
Yep.
issue in my area, which is challenging. But the other issue that I just wanted to touch base, and there again, kudos to the department for training such great people, because I think you've lost 2 deputies to police chiefs in the local area. I know City Pacific took one of ours, and now Bonnie Lake. So you must be doing something right.
Trying, yes, indeed.
So, looking at kind of how things are running, do you feel comfortable with the patrol budget that we've put forward? I'm not going to put you on the
Yeah.
spot, but because your boss is behind you, but.
Yeah, it's tough. I want more people. Because I hear it from my people, just as you hear it from your constituents, saying, we need more cops, we need more cops. And my people are saying, we need more of us, we need more of us. I haven't had a day off. I got mandatory overtime. I need to work again, and I missed my kid's soccer game because I had to be mandatoried. Those are the things that are tough for me to hear. And if I get a couple more people, then they don't have to be mandatoried. And it's just is that line? And, and we know we're going to have people, going out on FMLA. We know people are going to be called up for military reserve duty or whatever it might be. Someone's going to get injured. People are going to be out at times. And the unknowns, the quick, hey, I'm retiring, or I'm resigning. I found something else I want to do. Those ones just hurt because you gave me, the minimum 5-day notice that you needed to give me, and now I need 11 to 14 months to replace you. And that's if I can hire you today, but it might be a 3-month process to hire you. And so I don't feel like I'm ever going to be comfortable with enough right now, because the unknown and not having enough and being so far behind is just tough. And so it's tough for me to answer your question.
Yeah, okay, okay. And I appreciate the department being open to having, to bringing in new technology to offset some of the manpower challenges that we have out there. Boston Dynamics has a patrol dog by the name of Spot.
I've seen it in action.
We need to take a look at that. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Denson?
Yes, thank you, Chief. You mentioned the pending calls and that sometimes people have to wait. But do the deputies respond to all calls eventually, or because if you, according to Facebook,
Yeah.
right, you'll see people, they're not coming, they never, it just goes on. And I would like to be able to say, yes, they will come. You may just need to be patient because they've got other priorities.
Yeah, so that's a tough one. I can say from my days in Edgewood, I can say from the perspective of, knowing what the chief did in University Place, the concepts of no call too small.
Right.
We went to everything. I mean, that's just kind of the service that's provided in those communities. We'd love to be able to say that here, but the calls are too great, and we do have to prioritize those. I'd love to say we're coming to everything still, with the ones that make sense, your property crimes and so on and so forth. But some of those property crimes now are being diverted to, can you report this online, please? Now, we know some people are just going, that's not worth my time. I'm not going to report it then. And that's troubling because now we're not getting the statistical information to show that, hey, this neighborhood is really being hit hard because they're not reporting it. But I'm a citizen. I recognize my time is important to me, and if the cops aren't going to be here for the next 6 hours, I'm going to bed. I'm not waiting up to report this, so maybe tomorrow. I can say hopefully we get there, but I'm also recognizing we're probably not making it to everything. Some things people are just saying don't bother, or the cops are saying I can get there tomorrow, and maybe they call back or not. But if it's a priority, we should be responding to every one of those. If you have a domestic, if you have an in-progress crime, we should be responding. You still may have to wait because it's going to take us time to finish that last one. But and then if it's a big thing, we should be breaking from those other calls. But yes, priorities, we should be responding to all of those. But some of the other ones, I hate to admit, we're probably not coming to all of them.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Lemberg, I'm glad we could bring you back to have this more focused conversation about patrol. It's what most people think of when they think of this side of the Sheriff's Department, and it's so appreciate us being able to ask a few more questions so we can be not only better informed about the budget, but better informed out in the community when we're answering questions of our constituents about their level of service. And, just one other thought from my perspective, everything you're saying, we need to get you more staffing resources now and into the future, and that takes money. Everything to continue things like the retention and recruitment bonuses long after the ARPA dollars go away, to have those sort of financial incentives to staffing up the agency appropriately. That's all going to take money. And as you continue to remind us, we have a service territory of the Sheriff's Department that is quite urban and quite suburban, with a lot of population and a lot of square miles, without the same funding sources as our cities do. Our cities have different and more funding options to pay the bills. So I hope all of us who are advocating for more sheriff's deputies and law enforcement are also going to be willing to advocate for revenue options for county government, so we can have the financial resources to do these essential, critical public services. It doesn't grow on trees. It doesn't happen just by wishing it. We have to go to the legislature to advocate for more and different funding options. And the kind of funding options we have right now are not keeping up with inflation because of artificial limits on the kinds of finance options we do have. So it's one thing to advocate for law enforcement. It's another thing to do what it takes to advocate for the revenue so we can have appropriate public safety. And I hope we all join together in doing that. Thank you, Chief Lundberg. I'm going to invite Chief Jackson up to continue the discussion in the jail.
Good afternoon, members of the council, Deputy Weinsbury, Deputy Boki. Thank you very much for having me today. Just wanted to take a minute. Major Jones and myself are very happy to come up and try to answer these questions. He didn't know it, but I did wear my lucky shoes today, and he wears lucky flamingo shirt, so we are good to go. And so my questions are, I think, very straightforward. I just want to make certain that the very first question that came out said, why are there more screenings than bookings? And I'm hoping that I'm looking at the right area. I'm not sure who asked the question, but I was wondering if we're looking at the workload services highlights. So if we're talking about the bookings, and then if we're talking about the mental health and psych evaluations, is that what we were talking about? Okay. So on this sheet, page 23, I do see that it was 8.2 thousand for the prisoner bookings and 12.6 for the evaluations and screening. And I can tell you that the evaluations are not always done just one time. So if I'm in there and I'm needing more service while I'm there, that could happen for that. So hopefully that answers that question. The second dot was the JCAP number, which is the Jail Confinement Alternative Program, that we noticed that it's decreasing, and is the goal to reduce those, and why? And so the answer to that is no, that is not a goal. Part of the reason it's decreasing has been, first plagued by the COVID crisis that ended up stopping the number of individuals we could bring into custody. And then now we're coupled by the staffing crisis that we're experiencing. And even if somebody's going to be coming in and going back out to another program, we still have to have the staff to be able to man those, places to be able to take more people in, et cetera. Because if they are going out to the JCAP, for example, they still would have to be in our jail to get booked, and then they would also need to go to court, et cetera, and so it does offset that. So hopefully that answers that. The third bullet spoke to, under the program expenditures, what is the difference among administration, care and custody, and programs and services? Those are actually the three cost centers that are assigned to the jail, and so different programs are run out of different, those cost services, whether it be courts, classifications, things along those lines. And then the fourth bullet asks, do we have any volunteer programs coming into the jail? Right now, yes, we do, in a Zoom basis, right? And that would be programs that we have through the Pierce County Alliance, or PCA as we know it, and they are still teaching things like the substance use disorder program, education program, and things along those lines. In the future, it's always great to want to have volunteer programs that are coming in. The problem stems that even if you have a volunteer program coming in, you still need staff to man that and oversee that, because you can't have the civilians in an area with the individuals that are incarcerated without having a deputy involved in that. So that is something that we'd very much like to do. We've had it before, but it's been a long time. And the time that both Major Jones and I have been there, the new jail, as we lovingly call it, right, that was built well before some of the men and women that are working for us now were even born. That place was kind of designed with an idea, we've got a multi-purpose room that we'd be able to have programs, and that never even hit the ground running. So that answer. And then the fiscal impact to the county of the true blood obligations that are unmet to date. I know that last budget meeting that we had, I think I was spouting off like a 1.8 number, and it was more 1.2. So, and that was the pending, all the legal litigation and thing that came out of that. And so I think one of the questions was, kind of what is the fiscal impact, but I'd like to say that that number is just kind of what they kind of can cost out. But we're talking human lives as well, and not just the individuals who are the true blood members, but also the other individuals that are incarcerated in the facility that are impacted, by services that other people are getting that they might not quite get that. So it is something that I am incredibly proud of, and with the fact that we have, we're short-staffed, as is everybody. It is a definite problem. Our team that works for the Sheriff's Department, that are our mental health evaluation specialists, we have a budget for a group of 8 specialists and a manager. We recently got our fourth evaluator hired, right? People don't want to come and work inside the jail when they can do the same kind of work outside, or maybe even from, a home office, right? Doing telehealth and things, of that nature. So it impacts in many ways. And I will tell you that I couldn't be prouder of the men and women that I work for. They do a phenomenal job at just doing the best that they can to help the individuals who can't help themselves. They do a great job for that. And if it weren't for people that are truly caring, we would have individuals that we're seeing in a much worse state than we see today. If I can move on to the next bullet. Are the medication for opioid use disorder, or the MOU, services in the jails fully funded? So this program is actually a program that is, we're partnered with Pierce County Alliance, who also is partnered with Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. And so they are able to help provide mechanisms for individuals that were already on, for example, methadone out in the community. It's something that we would like to obviously have follow individuals who are already established on the methadone program to come in. So they are that bridge to that, so we are partnered with that. We, as you know, get health care provisions by NAFCARE. That's our contract to handle the medication and whatnot in the jail. So I want to point out that while we're talking about the MOUD, services, it's actually, things that are also done by NAFCARE, right? And so what it's designed to do is it's designed to help individuals that are suffering from the opiate the opiate use disorder, right, addiction, right, if you will. It's to kind of help people to make sure that they're still able to live. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And so everybody that comes into the jail does get screened. That doesn't mean that everybody is going to be a candidate for that program, even though many people think that they should be, and that's based on various reasons. But people that are there that are wanting to get that program, we screen everybody that comes in, whether they're coming in for a property crime or an aggressive, assault against individuals, DUI, you name it, they get screened. Sometimes they don't want to tell us what they're going through. Trust, stigma, whatever it is. We've got a very good group of men and women that are trained well to really be watching out for those withdrawal symptoms and things like that. They then report that up to our medical units, and we do get individuals the help that they need. So I'm very proud of that. And I think then the next question is how many of our detainees are taking advantage of this treatment. It's probably a number less than you would think, and it's just because either that they don't feel like, it's going to work for them, or they know they're going to be here for just a few days, and, that drive to get that drug, that drive to catch, and chase that high is much greater than getting that help. So it's a hard number to say, but I can just circle back to the fact that everybody has that opportunity. Once they're in custody and they recognize, hey, I'm going to be here for a minute, people do tend to try to take advantage of that program if they can. And so we have a fantastic medical director, which is Dr. Balderrama. I know I just sing his praises because, there's many, right, high-end medical areas around us. And for somebody that is dedicated as much of his life to working in the correctional health care setting that's, an applause, moment in and of itself. And then NAFCARE does do a fantastic job working with us to make sure that they're providing good care. So when individuals do exhibit the need for some intervention, they are getting it. So I hope that answers that. We're not just saying, too bad, you told us you didn't want it at the beginning. What are the specific criteria to qualify for the enrolled in the program? So that the booking and screening nurse, when people come in, they do an evaluation on everybody, and then that kind of just lets us know how are they going to do the next few days, right, while they're coming into our custody, right? They're entrusted to our care. How are they going to do the next few days while they're there? And then we kind of, evaluate where they're at. We have people that we know either by history, right? It's kind of sad, but a lot of the individuals that are there, we're seeing, Steve and I know now, are seeing the children of people that were coming in to custody when we first started working, or even, I hate to age myself, and hopefully council Councilmember Morrell's going to do my math on my age as well. I've been here longer than Micah. But that said, I've been here long enough that probably even some of their grandchildren are coming in. So specific criteria is basically, somebody that meets the criteria on the points of the, evaluation system, that they show that they actually are suffering from the OUD. And there is a list of criteria. And I'm going to tell you that the question, and I emphasized it, I highlighted and underscored it where it says any reason that would trigger a denial. But probably part of that denial would be if we knew that somebody was going to be going to another facility that doesn't have a program, the last thing you would want to do is to get somebody on a program, and then they would transfer out to another area. But that does not mean that they would be left to, just swim without an oar, right, and go through any of the withdrawals without assistance. It just means that we wouldn't maybe put them on a program that put them on a different drug. And then finally, I think the last question, if I'm not mistaken, is there a need for case management upon leaving the jail for any person who participated in MOUD? That is there. That's out there. It exists. Is there enough? I can't answer that question because, a lot of the programs do things, on their own. Tacoma Fire Department, I'm just speaking now to the local areas of who we do handoffs to, right? They still have, I know they call it something different now, right? We used to call MOUD MAT, and so now it's MOUDs. So they used to have the Tacoma, the TFD CARES, right? The CARES program. I'm not sure what they call it now. I know it's something different. They actually have services to provide to come out and get individuals who are coming out of jail. Pierce County Alliance does that. There are a few of the private doctors and centers that do that as well, and we do help with connectivity to those services for when individuals are releasing from custody. And I think that was it.
Chief, I think following up on that last thing, we can imagine someone gets released from jail, whatever time of day that is. What is
Apparently
the?
I've had enough. I don't know what that high whistle was.
I don't know what the whistle is.
Yeah, it was time to go.
Can imagine someone leaving the correctional facility, getting back to their life, hopefully, but not. But what does the warm handoff look like to the services? Because it seems like it's too easy to not follow up,
right.
Not do what you are encouraged to do, and do any number of other things, and not follow up. So what does
Right.
that warm handoff look
Right.
like?
So, I mean, and I hate to sound flippant, but it's as warm as they'll allow it to be, right? And so we have individuals that while they're in custody, they say the right things, they do the right things, they act the right, way. But when I'm getting out and I'm chasing that high, I'm going to get it, and I'm going after it. And we will have people that, say, hey, can you let, for example, Patty Jackson out of jail at, 9:30, we'll be there, and Patty Jackson runs, because I'm chasing the high, that they're making the calls, we hear it. But we do have liaisons that work with individuals for that same purpose that you're talking about. We can't, once they've been released from our custody, unless there's something specific that states in the court order that says, Patty Jackson can be released to this, this person, so we call it a PDC, which is a person directed by court, they're going to get out and do what it is they want to do. But we do work to make sure that, and I know everybody always goes, why don't you let people out later? And I'm like, why don't you start programs earlier? Because we have to be able to maintain the hotel that we're, right, overseeing. When somebody says, we're going to be there at 9 o'clock to pick them up, we do hold off and we don't let those individuals out till 9 o'clock. It exists, but again, it belongs to the person that's getting on that program.
Thank you for answering the question, Chief. Other questions for Chief Jackson? Councilmember Herrera.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a quick question. Thank you for the presentation. On the opioid use disorder services in jail, is that for everybody? Does it serve your contracting cities and DOC violations? I know they come
Right, so that would be anybody that was incarcerated in the facility. And so, I mean, the number of contracts that we have right now, as you know, is pretty much close to zero. But we really take into account if it's going to be somebody that is needing, say, additional medications that's more than just a cost, we do put those costs off to those agencies that have a contract. Department of Corrections, they, at least in the day back, they didn't have an MOUD program, and so we weren't doing anything for them. We are not taking DOC prisoners only right at this point. I mean, unless there's a prolific, offender, something, there. We don't have the space, the type of space that are necessary to hold that level of person that would be coming back.
Thank you. Teacher.
Thank you. Other questions? Chief Jackson, thank you very much for being here in person and following up on our questions. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
So we went through our written questions. Does any other member have any other questions while we have the command staff here? I'm not seeing any. I want to thank again Sheriff Troyer and your command staff for, again, coming back for this discussion. We are disappointed, Chief Lundberg, that you arranged your vacation schedule to try to avoid us, but we won't take it personally. But we're glad we got to have you for this discussion today. It was very informative. We learned a lot, as always, and we can't thank you all enough and the people who you lead. So we're very grateful. Thank you. If we do have any more questions, we'll be sure to follow up through Mr. Bridges. Council members, I know the day is long and we've been at this since 9:30, but we are at the point of discussion or any observations or further questions about anything we heard today. So allow me to open it up for that purpose. Is there any other final discussion, questions, observations about anything we learned today? Councilmember Hitchin.
My brain is full. I have a lot of notes, and I think we should adjourn.
Thank you. I'm sensing the same, but I needed to ask the question because it was on the agenda. I want to thank everyone again for a good full day, and we're going to continue to build this budget together. So seeing no other business before the committee of the whole, we are adjourned.